Tuesday, January 14th. We have new committee assignments, so I want to thank the former chair, Linda Vacan, for putting together today's agenda and having department heads and other members prepared for the meeting tonight. My name is Rebecca Lisi. I'm a city councilor at large. To my left, we have Ward 6 Councilor Juan Anderson Burgos, Ward 2 Councilor Terrence Murphy, and then to my right, Ward 5 Councilor Linda Vacan. We received the previous meeting minutes this afternoon. I have not had a chance to look at them. Has anyone else?
No, I
Yeah,
didn't
I
have a chance.
Barely, but I did get a chance to review. They seem like they're okay,
Do you want to table them?
but I have no problem if you want to wait.
Sure. So then let's table the previous meeting minutes to the next meeting. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to table.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Item number 2 is a special permit application of Holyoke 420 LLC doing business as Holyoke Cannabis to site and operate a RMR store at 380 Dwight Street. Are the applicants here? Okay. All right, so let's see. This is Holyoke 420. And I know that you have submitted an application to the planning board, and we got feedback from the planning board that, again, the former chair was able to circulate. And we do have a communication from the planning department that gives us a Cliff Notes version of what items are outstanding in some way. They're not fatal flaws in the application. And this particular applicant has submitted an application, gotten feedback from the department as far as I understand, and then has made some amendments. So before we go through any of the outstanding questions, we'll let you do a little bit of presentation about what you expect to do on this site. Hopefully some of those questions might be answered by then, and then we'll take it from there. Name and address for the record, please.
My name is Blake Mensing. I live at 1865.
I don't
That
think
microphone needs to
mic's
be
up on top there.
the actual, yes, push the
Up, there you go.
switch up.
Yep.
Alrighty. I am Blake Mensing. My address is 1865 Washington Street, Holliston, Massachusetts. I am the co-owner of Holyoke 420, doing business as Holyoke Cannabis. And my 9 to 5, although those aren't the real hours, is as a cannabis attorney. So all I do is help people, aspiring cannabis businesses, go through the local permitting process and the state licensure process. And that's based on my background as a regulatory attorney in the environmental law context, as well as having been a municipal attorney for 3 years, representing 7 towns throughout the Commonwealth. So with that background, I think, I hope that is indicative of the commitment to compliance that we have. For whatever reason, I have always loved following rules. It gives me great joy. So that is my world. It's the way I think. My business partner, James Jaron, couldn't be with us tonight, but he is a Holyoke resident. He owns Zap Electric, which has done some work for the city of Holyoke. And then also just as background, I'm working with C3RN, Cannabis Community Care and Research Network, that has a social equity training program curriculum being developed in concert with Holyoke Community College. So I'm all in on Holyoke. I'm trying to open a business. I'm trying to give back to the community, both through my business and basically as a pro bono attorney through the social equity training program, as I just mentioned. So the plan for 380 Dwight Street, Unit 3, is to do an adult use retail establishment. The gross floor space total is about 1,900 square feet. The area that will be accessible to customers will be just under 800 square feet. We'll have 5 points of sale, security regulations and compliance with 935 CMR 500.110, and developed in concert and consultation with the chief of police here, whose letter signing off on our security plan were included in our application materials. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell, and obviously any questions you have, I'm happy to answer. We have our architect, Bob Havalis, here as well, and our general manager, Karima Risk, as well, who've all spent many, many hours agonizing over every detail. So as I said, we're happy to make adjustments and answer any questions you might have.
Okay, great. And so just to be clear, because you do speak very fast.
Oh, thank you.
So the permit is for the adult retail establishment, and is there going to be non-retail sales there at all?
No, it will solely be customer-facing. So any adult 21 or over with a currently valid, I'll try to slow down, currently valid government identification will have to be vetted before they enter the facility. They'll have to be vetted essentially when they're making their purchase. So there'll be multiple layers of age verification, but there will be no wholesale sales done from the premises.
And no grow.
No grow, no.
Okay.
Though I will tell you, both my business partner and myself, we have separate entities that are pursuing grows just independently, and certainly the intent is to stock our shelves with some of our own products.
Great, thank you. Are there questions from the committee?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Councilor Murphy.
So I know you noted that you expect 400 trips a day. And hours are what? What are your expected hours?
We hope to operate in the maximum window that the Holyoke ordinance allows, 8 to 8.
Okay. So doing quick math for me, 12 divided into
Oh boy,
400.
I went to law school explicitly to not do math, but let me try it.
About
So
35.
it's 400 trips a day, meaning 200 customers?
200-ish customers, yeah, and I'm sure you're aware of the other establishment that'll be in the same building, and certainly we're aware of them as well. And ultimately, I think there's going to be, a split based on the success of our marketing, the customer experience, et cetera. So I don't think a second store at that same address will, it's not going to be a doubling of the number of people who might have come, and that's why I adjusted down those expected trip numbers. We're also hoping to benefit from some of the public transport options in close proximity. So the train station, a couple of bus stops, and then at the suggestion of the planning department or the economic development department, we did add in bike racks to accommodate those folks as well.
Right.
And can you...
So, Councilor Murphy, just so you know, it's 33 customers per hour.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I drove down there and drove through again this morning, or actually yesterday afternoon, and then I took another look this morning. But I drove through the parking lot that is not in the best of shape. So do you know what the plans are in terms of repaving and also in terms of lining?
So the other tenant, the other cannabis establishment is, I believe, footing the bill for that repaving. I don't know the answer off the top of my head. We do have the landowners here that may be able to answer. Basically, our lease entitles us to use the space internal and entitles us to a certain designated number of parking spaces that we set upon in relation to the ratio required in the ordinance. So I believe that was 8 required by the ordinance, and then we have the option to secure another 12 spaces, which I think we will elect to do. But I don't know if you'd like to hear from the landowners on the striping.
Right now, you have 8 spaces that you are guaranteed.
Correct.
Reserved for your
Correct.
business. And, but if we're talking back in and out, obviously 33, so I'll divide that and make it 20 in an hour. That looks like that could be pretty tight. And then how many employees were you talking?
I will, at full staff, we'll have about 20 employees, obviously not all on the floor at the same time. We do intend to have a Spanish-speaking staff member on the floor at every shift, obviously in recognition of the population here. So, in answer to your traffic question and parking question, so ultimately we think a lot of the visits will be sort of either by bicycle, train, bus, or walking off the street. There's also the municipal parking lot directly across the parking the street, Dwight Street. We're going to request that our employees park at the municipal lot. There's also on-street parking, and certainly as a function of the host community agreement, there's sort of a continuing dialogue. So we have a opening days plan where we sort of expect and hope an initial crush of visitors for the novelty factor, and then we'd expect if the lot can't handle that, we have already built in the host community agreement a dialogue, and also in conversations with the chief of police to address through police details if it came to it, appointment only. We're very sensitive to not being a congestive force in terms of drawing people in.
And I know you mentioned your employees, you're going to encourage them to park in the
We are going to require them to park,
okay.
Yes.
Okay, you're paying for that parking, or?
We intend to actually pay slightly higher than the standard rate. So I guess we haven't hashed out whether or not that'll be a direct benefit or not, but we certainly can have that discussion.
Okay. And then if you don't mind, I would like to, if the property owner could let us know if there are plans to repave and how many.
I have you in queue.
And that would be my last
It's
question.
in our documents.
Hi, my name is Terrence Bernard. I'm one of the owners of the building. I live here in Holyoke. The Canna Provisions, the other cannabis tenant in the building, is in the process of repaving the entire lot. They had removed a building earlier this year. There were some questions about stormwater, stuff that had to happen for the parking lot. And so they will be completing the parking lot around the end of March and into April. And so the finished parking lot will have a total of about 35 parking spots, in addition to areas for bike racks and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Bacon?
Thank you. I was just going to note that in a letter from DPW, it talks about that parking lot project, and right now it has a small project permit, and they need a large project permit, and they recommended that a CO for this application not be approved until those are obtained and the project is done, but it sounds like it's all in process and in progress and should move along fine. But they just referenced it in this, in the correspondence for this application, which you should have.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if I saw the letter in the package, but I do have an electronic file. So I can read some of the highlights, but I think Counselor Bacon just hit them. So this is from our city engineer, Bob Parent. It says the DPW has reviewed the documents for the retail establishment at 380 Dwight Street, Unit 3. The site plan submitted in support of the application shows very minor site modifications, does not depict any proposed repaving activities. However, the DPW recently became aware of an ongoing project to expand and repave about 20,000 square feet of the existing parking lot at 380 Dwight Street. So this is the Canna Provisions upgrade to the parking lot that Mr. Bernard just mentioned. And so the DPW isn't addressing those, sorry. This project application requires a large stormwater permit, and they only have the small at this site. So that has to be secured in order to cover the appropriate amount of square footage that's going to be repaved. So no certificates of occupancy for the 420 LLC project or any additional projects located at 380 Dwight Street should be issued until the Holyoke Stormwater Authority has approved the proposed site improvements. In addition, the applicant and property owner should be aware that any future modifications or expansions to these site improvements may require additional permits from the authority. So the applicant should be required to locate and verify the condition of the existing service and confirm that it's separate from any roof or stormwater drains. This is related to the sanitary sewage. And then the applicant shall submit a traffic and parking mitigation plan to the city engineer. A minimum of 45 days in advance of beginning retail sales. The mitigation plan is to be subject to review by the city engineer and public safety officials. And this is about the traffic impacts, which I think I understood that you already had submitted, and the police chief had reviewed that.
Yeah, so it was both a part of the submission for tonight's hearing and was at least addressed, I believe, in person in the in-person meetings with the chief. I was not present for those meetings. That was my partner, James Jaron. But yeah, I have no issue on having our special permit have a condition relating to the sort of larger stormwater work and repaving. Essentially, it's one of timing. They are farther ahead in the licensing process with the state, so I certainly know and expect that they want to be open. So I'm not worried about that delay impacting our rollout. And just so you're aware, we applied to the state on October 1st. So in my experience dealing with this agency all day, every day, we probably won't hear a word until, let's see, November, December, January. Probably not till May, April or May, yeah. And I'm sorry, Karima.
And just your name and address for the record.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Karima Risk, and I live at 38 Everett Street in East Hampton, just over the fine hill known as Mount Tom. I'm the general manager, as they mentioned, and I've been communicating extensively with the city on this special permit application. I did have the opportunity to speak with Bob, a parent as well, about his letter, and we did touch base in terms of the timing, as Blake was mentioning. Our licensing, we were probably at least a good 6 months behind Canna Provisions in terms of opening. My understanding from conversations with both the city and our landlord is that Canna Provisions will resume their improvements to the parking lot this spring, and so the repair work should, as per the timeline, be well and fine by the time we're not even looking at least until August, but you know that's a flexible timeline. So there should be several months in between when we would feasibly be going for a CO and when the repairs are complete.
Okay, great. Anyone else on this point?
I would just,
Sure, Councilor Bacon.
I would just note the date of the letters so we can put it as part of a condition.
Oh, yes, I see what you're saying. Mhm. Okay. Okay, so I have that bookmarked as a condition.
Sure.
Are there other questions from committee members? So let's go through some of these outstanding issues. So site waste, again, this is the Cliff Notes version. Site waste, per the zoning ordinance 71062B, regarding improvements plan, Holyoke Cannabis will have a dumpster at the far end of 380 Dwight on the asphalt between the building and Dwight Street. In previous reviews, the Holyoke Police have expressed awareness some people may attempt to illegally process cannabis waste, even though it is processed such to lose all psychoactive effects. The planning staff wanted to make sure that the applicant included this dumpster location in their discussion of the site security plan with the police. Additionally, staff raised a possible use of landscaping to buffer these street-facing waste receptacles, in addition to their vinyl fenced enclosure. Have you heard this yet?
Yes, so we're totally fine putting whatever landscaping buffer might be accommodated in the space. From my understanding, the physical width of the area sort of would preclude trees. So I'm no expert in shrubbery, but I would say a shrubbery might be the right screening mechanism. Obviously, we'd pick a native plant to potentially serve as a habitat.
And then I think the more outstanding question here, besides the screening effect, is that in the past, the police have been concerned of people searching for weed products, and have the police reviewed the dumpster location and the way you're going to be processing the contents?
So the state regulations require that any cannabis waste be rendered unusable, as you said, to sort of obviate the psychoactive fun part of it. And what that will do is be essentially grinding it up with organic matter of some sort. I think people use kitty litter or dirt or something. So that's the first step to make sure it's not an attractive, basically an attractive target. The second is that the state regulations require that the dumpster enclosure itself be locked, and then the dumpster itself be locked. And I'm very keenly aware of the fine levied against MCR Labs in Framingham. They got a $250,000 fine for an unlocked dumpster. So I assure you, that dumpster will be locked, because I don't want to pay a $250,000 fine.
Anything else? Okay. Okay, moving on. The shared vestibule improvements plan. So this is from sheet A102. The first floor plan depicts a shared vestibule entryway to Holyoke Cannabis as an yet unoccupied unit 2, which is tentatively scheduled to be a cafe. So planning staff wanted to make sure that the applicant cleared this vestibule as part of their site security plan, and that it was approved by the police. The security office inside, and the narrative describes the ID and queuing process, all of which take place inside Unit 3 rather than in the shared vestibule.
So there will be...
In the microphone, please.
Oh, yes.
And if you need to take it out to walk
Oh,
around
sure.
and point, that's fine also.
Thank you. Okay. So the procedure will be, so right here is where the parking lot is, and here's the shared vestibule. So the Holyoke Police Department is asking and requiring armed guards. So we're going to be hiring a third-party security company. not to go too far down the rabbit hole of federal law, but essentially that's a favor to us to avoid potential enhanced penalties if the federal government were to come and say, hey, we're going to literally enforce federal law, which of course our entire industry is directly contrary to federal law. So again, drug crimes that involve firearms have extra long sentences, so we are not going to have any employees of our own that work directly for our entity with firearms. And frankly, I feel uncomfortable about it, but if the Holyoke Police Department wants it, we'll do it. So yeah, there'll be an initial screening for IDs before you're even in this common area vestibule. There will be a planned sort of coffee house, tea house adjacent to us. Obviously, those folks, if they're going that way, I don't think they'll have to be carded. So that'll be the first gatekeeper. Then there'll be this sort of security vestibule once you're in the building physically, another ID check, and then there's going to be, in essence, a man trap. So you'll be let in to one increment, the door will shut behind you, and you're not going to be all the way into the facility until you're all the way verified.
And so, how many armed guards did you say that you're going to be hiring?
I believe the police department required a single armed guard per opening hours, so we'd probably do that in a couple of shifts, given it's a 12-hour opening window. Oh, okay. No, it's okay. So yeah, just sorry, Kareem was just correcting me that technically the first part of our man trap will be where the armed guard is. So I just wanted to clarify that the first door of that is not directly in our unit, but again, there's going to be a human being physically there saying, where are you going and are you old enough?
So the initial screening for IDs is happening in advance of the vestibule. Once you're in the vestibule,
Maybe Kareem should answer.
you should just go to the microphone.
Also, we have our esteemed architect as well, Bob Havlis, over here, if we have any questions for him, but I'd be delighted to give you guys a quick overview. So unless we're at a capacity where we're overwhelmed, we have such a big crowd that folks need to queue, and we do have provisions for that in our opening day plans. The customers will enter into the common entry vestibule. Immediately, they'll see both a hired security guard as well as one of our staff. Before they proceed into the facility, we will have one of our staff members check ID and then also manually unlock the door with card access. And then they will have another security check at any point. I'm happy to walk you guys through where the customer flow goes.
And I'll just tell you, I'm not a visual thinker, so these pictures mean nothing to me, so I apologize for any errors.
So I'm just going to try to capture that one more time to make sure I've got it right. So you have a 420 Holyoke employee doing the ID check in advance of the common area vestibule?
No, sorry.
That's okay. There we go.
Thank you, sorry. So the common area vestibule is common to the mill. So unless, again, we're overflow, in which we need a queue and we have provisions for that, folks will enter into the common area vestibule. Immediately, they will see us on the right.
Okay. Use the map, it's great.
Perfect, right there. And immediately before the entryway, that will be the ID checkpoint. So outside the common vestibule, and this is where our staff is to check IDs, first point of check. Again, unless we're in overflow, in which case we have parking stripes and stanchions and other things to safely queue along the building way.
Oh, wait, so let's just keep going because we have to just get this straightened out. So there's a common area vestibule that's for the entire building.
Sure.
Then you're moving into, so once you're in that area, that's where the ID check happens by your staff before entering your site, your unit. And then when they're in that unit, that's where the armed guard is, or?
No, why don't I take you away? Maybe then the natural flow of how a customer would go and kind of as a presentation. So again, in the common area vestibule, we will have an armed guard outside of our own facility, the licensed marijuana establishment. Right before you come to our entryway, there will be a staff member who checks ID for positive 21 plus identification and lets the person in. Upon entrance, the customer will come down and they'll meet a staff member at a hostess station whereupon they will identify, the hostess or staff member will ask if they're a regular customer, in which case we have 4 points of sale for that, or if they're an online order, they order in advance to kind of streamline operations, quick in and out, or also we can accommodate in the same expedited line. There will be an expedited line to this 5th counter that, if you notice in the drawing, it's at ADA height level. It's lower so a wheelchair could come up. This will be our line for anybody who needs special needs. If anyone's disabled or they need a little more time or a little more special attention, we can divert them. So upon meeting the person, they will be given a paper menu if they want one, any questions asked, and identified as to which line they should queue in. Most people will queue in stanchions and go to one of the 4 points of sale where they can have a conversation. At that point, before the sale commences or the transaction commences, they will have positive identification of age 21 plus again. If they are online order ahead, they will come up and get a pre-assembled package and check out having the same ID checks. And if they have any special needs, we will accommodate them at that area. After the transaction concludes and everything is in properly sealed and packaged containers, the customer will exit away and exit back out of the mill the same way.
Great. That was great.
See why she's my general manager.
Okay. And let's just make sure that satisfies the questions that were here. The Holyoke Police have approved the armed guard and the organization of the queuing.
So we've submitted the initial security plan, and as I said, the Holyoke Police Department's requiring the armed guard. I don't know if we've yet given them the opening day plan. We're certainly going, obviously furnished it to you, and we're intending to have that dialogue with them. Again, we hope there's an initial rush of extra people. And again, we'll have an open dialogue with the police department and other municipal officials to make sure what we've predicted comes true. And obviously, if there's an issue that we didn't anticipate, we're committed to taking all the steps required to mitigate.
Okay. Are there any questions about that? Councilor Murphy?
Yeah, just going back to this vestibule and the armed guard. So the armed guard is not really in your business. You're just paying for somebody that's outside the business. They're never going into where your business is. Or at least,
I mean, they may be
planning
in.
to go into your
Right,
business.
right. And again, that's so it will be a separate company, so it'll be an independent contractor, and that's. I'm a worrywart of an attorney, and so I just didn't want to have that extra layer of going through the process of getting someone with a license to carry under our direct employ, because I think that would jeopardize and potentially enhance criminal penalties against us as the business, and certainly the individual with that license to carry. I wouldn't want to invite him into a job. Hey, you got this job, and then. I don't think this will happen, but it certainly could if the federal government decided to reverse course and strictly enforce the Controlled Substances Act.
So, in reality, and maybe I'm wrong, I'm thinking the armed guard that's there really has no role other than being visible.
He or she will be there as a deterrent and for emergency response if there's ever any situation where, I mean, frankly, honestly, to me, you would have to be the world's most foolish criminal to try to attack one of these stores. There are cameras on every square inch. That's not to say someone couldn't try, and that's, I think, the police department's acknowledgement of that potential risk. And my hope is that it's deterrent. I certainly don't ever want it to have to be discharged anywhere near our facility for obvious reasons. But yes, they will be there as a reminder that this is a secure facility and you can't just do what you want.
Of course, this is a mandate from the Holyoke Police Department. We should state that for the record as well, that we're trying to meet.
Thank you. Anything else, Councilor Murphy? Okay, and then the 4th point that's in our executive summary here just talks again about the 8 customer parking spaces. Excuse me. According to the planning department, assuming that they operate between the window of 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., which is the maximum allowed by ordinance, those 8 spaces should adequately accommodate the hourly traffic that they anticipate under their traffic improvement statement or traffic impact statement. We could, however, determine that additional parking spaces would be necessary. Okay, so that's where we're at.
Just on that point, yeah, we're fully expecting and prepared to make use of those extra 12 spaces that are a part of our lease. I guess my one reply to that is just that the ordinance is dictates what the ratio is, and that's why we put that in the lease. But again, we're willing to acknowledge that it might not serve this particular use to a T in that ordinance, so that's why we'd more than double it based on what the ordinance requires.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, so I just want to recap. So far, the conditions that I have are that per the December 20th communication from our city engineer, that no certificate of occupancy will be granted until the site improvements are complete. That landscaping are used to buffer the screening of the dumpster. And then finally, that we ensure that the Holyoke Police Department approve the opening day plan. Are there any other items that councilors on the committee would like to add? Councilor Bacon?
Thank you. I would recommend that you reference the dates of the letters from DPW and the planning department and just say that they will comply with the conditions in said letters.
Sure.
And then also, we have our 6 standard conditions that we have been putting on the special permits for just about all of the applicants. One is that the owner of the building shall always pay
Retail.
commercial rates to the extent allowed by federal, state, and local laws, that the business retain a minimum of 30% Holyoke residents for the jobs, that hiring preference be given to security personnel that are police or retired member of another police department in Holyoke, that there shall be no marijuana consumption on the site, that there shall be no deliveries of retail or medical marijuana from the site to individual homes, residences, or people, that the hours of operation be in compliance with city ordinances, which at this time are 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. That's the gist of it. I missed a couple words at the end of
Thank you.
my lines, but these are standard and the language is available through the clerk's office.
We would gladly accept those conditions. The only special condition that I probably out of an overthinking, but given that we don't have the power to control when the parking lot is finished, again, I do think it will be finished because it's in their own vested interest to get it finished. Is there any way to have some sort of acknowledgement that that's outside of our power? I understand it's a prerequisite. I guess I just don't want to get held hostage if it's a project that we never started. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that because it is a prerequisite, we want to ensure that
Okay.
those improvements are made.
I guess I'll just sleep at night knowing that they're going to want their parking lot done. Okay, I'm over it.
As much as you do.
You want to speak, Councilor Murphy?
Yeah, and and again, having gone down there and looked at the parking situation, and the fact that you have a potential to get 20 parking spaces, I really would like to be that we would make that the condition of the permit, that they would have 20 customer parking spaces. I just don't want, I hope the business thrives, and I hope you say,
Thank you.
geez, I need 50 parking spaces. But I definitely don't want to be in a situation where Dwight Street, by the canals and everything, gets having people park on the street because there's not enough space in the parking. So if they can, and they have the ability to get 20 parking spaces as part of their lease, I would make that I would suggest that we make that a condition of the permit.
I'd be fine with that.
20 is built into the lease? That's going to need more conversation. You're going to need to come to the microphone.
As part of our parking plan, we do have the 35 spots going in. Those 12 spots are rentable by technically rentable by any of our tenants. In addition to that, we don't plan to put up signage for individual parking spots in the parking lot, but that will make the mechanics of the parking lot nearly impossible to enforce and use. So it's an open lot with 35 parking spots. So I'm not comfortable with saying that we have to dedicate 20 spots to these guys, because that will leave other people short as well. And there needs to be a certain amount of flexibility to a parking lot to work. For instance, the cafe will need parking spots as well. So there needs to be a certain amount of flexibility built into that. I understand that parking is a concern. Certainly my involvement with on Ray Street shows that we've always had parking too little parking in that area. But I think that's going to develop over time, and there's lots of alternatives. There's street parking. There's a number of other things that can be addressed with that.
So,
Counselor Murphy and then Counselor Bacon.
So total you have is, with the improvements that are going to be made, there'll be 35 parking spaces.
Yeah, some of the
And how much did the previous previous special permit?
originally it was actually 35 as well, and then there was a building torn down. And then in order to update the parking lot to meet normal parking lot codes like areas for people to walk and things like that, it reduced it back down to 35, even with the building
I think
done.
he's asking how many has Canna secured?
Canna has 10.
Canna has 10.
Yes, they have 10 spots, and
For
that's
their
because...
square footage?
What's that? I'm sorry.
Is that per their square footage? Are they a
Yes.
larger unit?
They have a larger unit, yes.
So there's also the municipal lot that, again, we're going to require the employees to go. There's the lot down by the train station that appears to be pretty underutilized every time I've passed by it. Obviously, we can only contract for what the landlord's willing to rent. So I guess as a way to acknowledge the concern and I think build in an additional sort of layer of review is, I think, a conversation we could have with the police department to essentially say, look, if the problems arise that are predicted, then we're going to have X, Y, or Z approach. So, I mean, again, as a partial owner of this, I would say that we'd capture as many monthly parking spots as we could from the landlord, obviously to make it as convenient as possible. A lot of other facilities in the state have done satellite lots with a shuttle. We could investigate municipal lots. But I guess, again, the starting point for me would just be the required ordinance ratio, which we have satisfied. And I'm telling you both orally and in what the written materials we said, we're committed to, not just putting blinders on and saying, well, you said it was okay, and not talking with you. That's just not who we are as a company and who I am as a human being. So, whatever the condition language has to be, again, we only have the power to rent the spaces that are available in the lot. And like I said, we will max it out if there's an issue with the parking, and we'd be completely comfortable with some sort of look back period to evaluate the performance of the lot as a special condition, and then have a plan to address any shortfall in parking spots if one is identified as an issue.
Could I just ask one more question in terms of the previous lease? They have 10 spots. Do they have the ability also to?
They have the same ability to rent of the 12 spots that
Okay.
are available for addition. Again, that's not a path that we think will make anything better in that location, because you're going to have customers who go to one store and then go to the other store because it's right there. Are they going to move their car to a different parking? That's just not going to happen. So I think we need to be flexible with how that works, and they need to be responsive to what any additional means that are necessary.
And
to
do you have
take
any
care.
idea how many spots the cafe might need?
So the cafe is basically getting no assigned spots, effectively. Maybe 3 is what we'll be able to do. And so there's going to be a lot that's going to be based on foot traffic and the existing customers coming to the cannabis stores, as well as people parked in the other lots in the area. So.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure that I understand. So based on the current square footage of the cafe, or the expected square footage of the cafe, you're anticipating only 3 spaces being required by ordinance?
Again, not dedicating spots to anything, but I am giving 3 spots to the cafe.
And
Yeah.
3. That's 21 spots.
There's
Oh,
10.
and you have 35. I'm sorry. I was
Yeah,
thinking about
there's-
the 20.
There's 10 for Canna. There's 8 for Holyoke Cannabis. There is 3 to 5 for an upstairs tenant yet to come that we are already negotiating with. And then there's a few spots for the cafe and 12 flex spots.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to pass it over to Councilor Bacon, and I'll come back to you, Councilor Murphy, and Councilor Bartley.
my main question was just answered. I was just curious how many of the other spots were committed. And then I believe in a correspondence from DPW, Bob Parent, it referenced a traffic mitigation plan, and that would be part of the conditions where we would refer to that letter. And it talks about if there were issues that, then I believe it's DPW that would be the department that would resolve that with you. And so that being part of the conditions, I think meets the point that we're making.
Yeah, we'd be absolutely happy with that condition.
And I'm just going to ask,
Can I add just a quick note to the record? Sorry. Just for clarification, we submitted also our opening day plans that include traffic and parking mitigation measures subsequent to DPW head Bob Parent's letter. So his letter hasn't been updated. We've verbally discussed it with him, but just as a point of clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. And so I just wanted to add, Bob, do you mind coming to the microphone for a moment? So the traffic and parking mitigation plan that you want submitted 45 days in advance of beginning retail sales is a separate plan from the opening day plan. Is that correct, or are they one and the same?
That is correct. Certainly what's been submitted already is a good start towards that plan. The industry is evolving every day, and what the council has typically done is put this standard condition on all of the cannabis permits except for maybe the first one or two, recognizing that we needed something that was open-ended enough to be able to react to what was happening at that time. So that's really the intent, is once this facility becomes real, it's ready to open, making certain that all the details relative to parking and traffic have been worked out.
Okay, thank you for that.
And one thing, if you don't mind, I was just going to comment on the whole parking situation. I'd say that this location is actually in much better position than other locations downtown in that it has the municipal garage right across the street. And because of that, we are far less concerned about parking issues here than we might be at another location.
Great, thank you. Are you all set, Councilor Vega? Councilor Bartley?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think we're in a public hearing. I don't think we got a motion to open a public hearing, so I think you might want to consider that. Before you go too much further.
I will make the motion to open the public hearing.
Motion made and seconded to open the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye, retroactive to 6:35.
That's okay, it's a good idea.
Thank you for not making repeat everything.
Thank you, Councilor Bartley, for being awake. All right, I know they're all thinking that. A couple things. One is, may I call you Blake?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Blake. You and your team have a copy of the letter from the planning board from December 17th?
I believe it is in the application package.
Okay, well, this is, I don't mean to, this is not a quiz, so it's December 17th. There's a myriad number of issues on here. I just want assurance that you've had a chance to address each and every one of these.
Yes, we submitted a substantive response that tracked every point identified, yeah.
Okay, so, and I believe you. So, see, I didn't get that. I should strike that. I didn't receive that part. So it's a little frustrating to me. I assume that was probably true, but if I didn't get it, I strongly doubt anybody else on this committee got it, okay? So that's that.
We do have a copy of it
So,
from
yeah,
January 13th. And
I didn't get it. January 13th, okay.
right, they sent it out this afternoon, and then planning staff sent over executive summary with all the outstanding issues.
Okay, all right, so I'm going to ask the planning staff to, it's just an internal thing, that
Sure.
we're all elected officials. The way we do this here is that we do have a committee, but every one of us has a right to ask you a question.
Of course.
You know, it'll just be the committee that votes, but planning staff is going to, ultimately, we'll take a vote of full council, as you know, one of these Tuesdays, but planning staff should at least send it out to all of us. So that's whatever. Okay, so I don't have that. So as long as you have updates, and then I heard I didn't get your first name, the general manager.
My name is Karima Risk. Thank you.
Karima?
Karima, like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Very nice. I think you're about 7'1" as well, so there you go. There you go. Isn't he a lawyer? Didn't Kareem Abdul-Jabbar go to law school? I think that's a trivia. I got to look that one up. Okay. The update, you said you have an update to Mr. Parent's letter. I have it here, but buried in my computer. So you've updated his?
Yeah, sorry, I'll comment, and I'd be more than happy, Councilor Bartlett, if you want to dive into any of the responses, in particular, any concerns with the question. The history is that initial letter from planning was sent. We responded last week, and then they have since updated with acknowledging our responses.
Okay, and the same with
I'm
the
so
city
sorry.
engineer, true? It was
For Bob's, we did not have, we have received Bob Parent's letter, I think, oh, I'm sorry. We actually communicated by phone. We did not have a written response because the nature of it was more intended for the stormwater permit to the applicant, but we did acknowledge receipt of the letter and absolutely will comply with the conditions.
Okay. And then I'm just really taken aback by the armed guard. This is the first. We've never had that. So I want to hear a little bit more about it, why HPD said, I take it's in their letter? It generally issues a standard letter.
Yeah, it was raised in our pre-application meeting with various department heads. Again, I expressed my sort of uncomfortableness with it. I'm all for Second Amendment rights. I just don't know that it needs to be near where my store is. But yeah, so I don't know the rationale other than they told us, and we said sure.
So I think just a committee, I think we need to get clarification because we've never had that recommendation once, and we've had a baker's dozen of these, and of course the last 3 years. Never one time has an armed guard been recommended. Not one time until now. Why? So that question's got to be asked, and it's got to be expressed. I mean, maybe there's some kind of maybe the answer will be, well, we've gotten certain intelligence, and okay, I'll respect that and leave it there. But there's got to be something a little more than you guys are the first ones in 3 years to get an armed guard.
That point is surprising to me. They told us
Right.
that it was required of all applicants.
Negative.
Okay.
Negative. Never seen it once.
Okay.
If it's helpful, the contact over there is Captain Moriarty is the one to speak with.
I think we're familiar with them. Yeah, I think we're good to go. But thank you for that. On the parking situation, okay. I heard what you said, Blake, and I'm not into making any parking requirements on here, but because I think that's a bridge too far. But I don't want any vendors to be recommending off-site parking at the train station. That's out of bounds. I mean, you've got a municipal lot, but that is not for marijuana retail customers. That's for train. I mean, I get it. I mean, and by the way, and I realize that lot is not heavily used, and it's more or less convenient. But there are more trains coming up and down through the Valley Flyer. So that is going to be a little more common, I hope, if Amtrak gets his act together, but that's an open question. So that's just an aside on that point. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so under public comment, is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak in favor or against this proposal? Special permit. Okay, hearing none, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing then.
Motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So moved. So we're closing the public hearing. Is there a motion to move forward on this application with the conditions?
I'd like to make that motion.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
I could second it, but I still got concerned about that parking, and I definitely respect the young guy back there.
The engineer.
Both of you young men. He thought I meant only Bob. But I meant both of you. But I do have, I mean, if we're talking potentially 4 different businesses that are trying to bring customers in, and it just seems to me like if they're successful, that just seems awfully tight. And then the other part that I have concern with is if you get 8 spots, but none of them are designated for you, you really don't have any spots. I mean, I have a hard time imagining that, let's just say the cafe does well, and they're serving great pizza at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturday when you're going to be busy, and they have all those spots. I mean, I'm still having a hard time, and having driven around that parking lot and trying to see it myself and try to imagine it, I just have a hard time figuring out, if you're successful, how we're going to mitigate what could be. And again, Dwight Street, I drive down Dwight Street on my way home from City Hall every time I leave here. And you're going over canals. It's not a very wide street in terms of parking. You got the Children's Museum and other things around. So, I mean, parking is still a concern. I can go along with everything else that we've done. It just seems to me like 8 parking spaces and 8 parking spaces that aren't really not reserved make it difficult for me to accept the parking part.
I'll recognize Councilor Bacon in just a moment. I just want to note, so like per the ordinance, each of the different tenants are meeting the required spaces by square footage. And so there's 23 spaces that are required for each of the tenants, and then there's the 12 flex spaces. So I think that based on the different traffic patterns that they'll each generate, that the flex spaces is going to be able to accommodate them. And if there is a need for overflow into the municipal parking lot, then that's there as well. But I think we can't really, I mean, of course we can create conditions that go above and beyond, but I think that the ordinance requirements are satisfied in terms of what is available in that lot, and then there's the flexible spots that allow each tenant to go above and beyond what is required. So I feel satisfied, and additionally, there's the traffic and parking mitigation plan that will be approved by the engineer, and the applicant said that they would be open to a further review process within like a 1 year or so we could identify whether there is adequate parking for the activity that's happening there.
I appreciate that. And again, if we're talking back when it was industrial and you had basically your employees were parking there, but we're talking about trying to create a traffic generator as opposed to a stable. You're coming from here to 8 to 5.
Yeah, but I do think that
again,
the ordinance is,
The debate.
well, we can discuss it. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the ordinance determines the parking per square footage based on the type of activity that's happening there. So based on the zoning, that determines what type of activity is there, and then the square footage is based on particular zoning, which also includes the types of activities. So the industrial use with the same square footage may require less parking spaces, but because we have the retail use here, and then I think that per the ordinance, it's meeting the requirement. Councilor Bacon.
Thank you. I'd like to suggest an additional condition. That would be that the applicant would agree as a mitigation for the parking if needed, that they would include shuttling people from a parking area that would not interfere with any of the other businesses in the area, i.e. the train parking lot. And if we make that as a condition that you would be willing to do that, I think that would address your concerns and the other concerns that were expressed earlier about maybe there's 3 or 4 growing businesses that are all fighting over those 12 spaces. So I think if the applicant is willing to, take that as a condition, I think that would resolve that.
If I may, I know that.
Madam Chair, close the public hearing. I suggest that if you're going to allow any more input from the public, that you reconsider and open it.
Thank you. So motion to reconsider closing the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and second to reconsider our actions. All in favor?
Aye.
And so moved. So then is there a motion that we reopen the public hearing?
I'll make the motion to reopen the public hearing.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
Thank you. We're totally fine with that condition. I would just want it to be tied to basically a predicate of the sentence would be if there is a parking issue identified in
Fine.
operations.
So
we're totally willing to do that, yeah.
So my motion is if there is a parking issue identified in coordination with DPW, that the applicant would agree to providing shuttle from a off-site parking area that does not interfere with
Absolutely.
other local business parking.
I'll second that. You're okay with that, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. And so we're not putting a specific timeline on that?
No, just if, because we don't know. I mean, that's part of the challenge.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
All in favor?
Anything
Aye.
else then?
Aye.
Well, I'm going to go through all the,
But this is an added
yeah, I'm
condition.
going to go through all the conditions so that we're all on the same page. If there's nothing else, then we should close the public hearing.
Make a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
Motion made and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
So moved, and then, so is there a motion that we grant the permit, given the conditions that I'll lay out now? Per the December 20th, 2019 letter from our city engineer, Bob Parent, no certificate of occupancy will be granted until all the site improvements are complete. Additionally, per that same letter of December 20th, a traffic and parking mitigation plan will be submitted 45 days in advance of the opening. And should any parking issues arise at the location, the petitioner will include a shuttle service to the site. Do you want to say from anywhere in particular, or just a shuttle service?
That's,
Yeah. Shuttle service to the site.
and the standard 6.
Yeah, well, there's still more. The Holyoke Police Department must approve the opening day plan. Landscaping to buffer the dumpster screening. And then the traditional 6 conditions, again, that the owner always pay commercial taxes, that the business retain a minimum of 30% local residents, that hiring preferences be given to retired Holyoke police or security officials for security services, no marijuana consumption on site, no delivery, and hours of operation must comply with the ordinance. Are you clear about all of those?
The delivery is direct to consumer delivery, prohibited, not obviously deliveries of product?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Thank you. I'll just make a note for myself there. Okay, is there any other discussion on these items then? So on the motion to approve, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. I'll be an aye as well, so that's 4-0.
Thank you kindly.
Thank you. This has to go
Thank you.
before the full city council next Tuesday, but other than that, you're all set here.
And just to clarify, is that something that I should be present for? Or is there no opportunity to speak?
I think at this point, there's no reason to be there. I think all the questions have been answered.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Okay, moving on in our agenda then to item number 3. That a special permit application for 4 Trees Holyoke LLC to build and operate a licensed recreational marijuana retail establishment and a manufacturing establishment at 1 Cabot Street. Is the applicant here?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion to, so I'll entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
Second?
Motion made and seconded to open the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. So are you giving us something for this in particular? Thank you. Yes, thanks. All right, this is done. Hi, do you mind stating your name and address for the record?
Sure. I am Stephen Goldman. Address is 30 Somerset Street, number 3 in Worcester, Massachusetts.
And I am Noni Goldman from 30 Somerset Street, apartment number 3 in Worcester. We have prepared a little presentation for you, if I could.
Come on in and bring the microphone along with you if you need it.
Speak from out here, I think.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. We'd like to walk you through our project. Again, thank you very much for having us here tonight, giving the opportunity to talk about what we're doing. We are 4 Trees. We are a small startup of blue-collar cannabis industry workers. We're hoping to build our home base here in Holyoke. Our background is in large-scale cannabis cultivation, but our dream is to create 4 Trees Holyoke as a small craft grow and a shop that complements the restoration efforts that are occurring here in the city. We are cannabis educators, we are social equity advocates, and we are plant experts, and we hope to be a part of the community here. Let me just very briefly introduce who's with me. So again, I am Stephen Goldman. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Four Trees. I'm here with my wife, partner Noni Goldman. She is the Chief Executive Officer of Four Trees. Behind me here, we've got the rest of our team. In the middle here is Arthur Brownsey. He's our Director of R&D. Together, the three of us are the founders of the company. We've also got key members of our advisory staff here. Closest to my right is our attorney, Marvin Cable. Over here in front, we have our compliance expert, Mr. Will Lazier. Will Lazier was actually the campaign manager for Yes on 4 that got adult use passed in 2016. He served as Assistant Attorney General and under 2 state senators. We also have Mr. Tim Stoddard. He is our expert in finance and communications. In the back here, all the way in the corner, Mr. Bob Saunders. He'll be our construction manager. Bob actually, he's a Holyoke resident, and his first job was actually in our building at 1 Cannabis Street. And next to him, Tom Casano, the owner of the property at 1 Cabot. So a little bit about who we are. Again, my wife and I and Arthur are the founders of the company, owners of the company. Arthur is a 2-time New England Harvest Cup winner for Best Indoor Cannabis Flower. Noni and Arthur met at PharmaCannabis in New York, which is New York's largest medical marijuana grow, where they helped lead the startup team get the greenhouse up and running and scaling rapidly. Noni herself was actually the head technical writer for Flourish seed-to-sale software, so she actually instructed companies, big and small, across the country in seed-to-sale product tracking compliance. So again, our experience isn't large scale, but we wanted to start, having seen the industry, wanted to start our own company, something small, something with a focus on sustainable growth, education, building positive company culture, and establishing best practices through R&D. And finally, we are the official cultivation educators for the Commonwealth's social equity program, working directly with the Cannabis Control Commission. So I'll jump right into our location. So Four Trees Holyoke plans to operate a cannabis adult use retail and cultivation facility in our terms RMRE and MME, using about 18,000 square feet on the street level floor of 1 Cabot Street in Holyoke. The building's a 4-story building. We have a portion of the 2nd story, which is accessible at street level. The proposed location is compliant with all state and local zoning requirements for cannabis establishments. We anticipate that interior renovation on the building would begin sometime in the spring of this year. Of course, we're going to work closely with all Holyoke departments to make sure that's done in a compliant manner with all codes and ordinances. And we anticipate our opening as late fall of this year. So what's happening on the site? So the RMRE, the retail store and the related offices, will occupy about 3,500 square feet at that street level corner of 1 Cabot. The cultivation, or MME, will occupy the remaining of the 18,000, about 14,500 square feet. We anticipate having 15 parking spaces available at outset directly on the lot for that property, including 1 van accessible space, which should meet the Holyoke ordinance requirements for both the retail and, and the manufacturing. We anticipate that 12 of those spaces at outset will be dedicated to Four Trees Holyoke customer parking. Additional spaces will be made available for future tenants as needed. There is on-street parking available on Cabot Street and Canal Street nearby, and employees will be encouraged to carpool and to park in the Canal Street municipal lot or to use alternate forms of transportation. As far as what's actually being done to the site, our proposed development includes the addition of an ADA ramp to our main entrance, a chain link fence around our delivery and waste area, Sallyport for deliveries, the repair of a platform already existing at the rear of the building to house mechanicals for the cultivation, and basic pavement marking. So included on the next page in the packet is a site map, which is an overlay on our site plan that shows you exactly where we are in the building. Again, this is the second of 4 floors, which is accessible via street level. You can see our retail store in the bottom corner that's closest to the entrance to the parking lot on Cabot Street. Directly behind it, the cultivation center, parking lots, parking spaces, bike rack, and ADA ramp are right there in the front of the building. The building, 1 Cabot Street, was originally constructed in the late 1800s, I believe 1892 if I'm correct, for Riverside Paper Company. Served for a long time manufacturing paper goods. Was the 1970s or so. It was taken over as the metal goods division for National Blank Book, where it served as a paper goods manufacturing distribution facility up until the very beginning of 2019. As it is the very first building you see when you enter town from Chicopee, crossing the Willimantic Bridge on the right. We've been working with building owner Tom Casano here. He's performing a number of restoration activities on the building. You see a couple of before and after shots in the packet. You can see at the top the restoration of the brick on the exterior of the building. One shot was taken early in 2019 and one just a few weeks ago. Brick looks brand new, looks great. Additionally, there's a replacement of a number of the exterior windows. Rather than putting up boards or sheet metal panels, Tom's goal is to make sure that the replacement windows match the historic mill aesthetic, but they will be, rather than being replaced with glass, they would be insulated aluminum double wall panels, which not only add the aesthetic of the historic mill windows, but an additional layer of insulation and security. So a little bit about the retail store. So the dispensary, the RMRE, again, that's about 3,500 square feet on the street level. We plan to sell craft quality goods produced by us on site and by select partner companies. We anticipate between 120 and 200 customers per day. This estimation is based on MJ Biz Daily consumer data for national average patronage of dispensaries, as well as keeping an eye on the continued maturity of the Massachusetts cannabis market. We anticipate that the retail store itself should create between 10 to 12 full-time equivalent managerial and entry-level positions. We are firm believers in training. We like to develop training programs ourselves. We plan to offer training and benefits to our employees, and we aim to preferentially recruit Holyoke residents. Finally, we do plan to seek bilingual dispensary agents wherever possible to help meet the needs of this community, and we will provide English and Spanish educational materials to our customers. The cultivation site right behind the retail store is a Tier 1, which is actually the smallest licensed tier at the state level. It will take the remaining of that 18,000, so again about 14,500 square feet of our area of the building. That is not only to include the grow spaces, but ancillary spaces, your drying, trimming and packaging, processing, locker rooms, things like that. We will use that to produce our award-winning cannabis flower to sell at our retail store and to select partner companies. Again, our unique experience in large-scale cultivation development and our consulting background will help us to create a clean, efficient, and effective operation. We anticipate that cultivation and related activities should create between 9 to 12 full-time equivalent positions, managerial and entry level. Again, we plan to provide training and benefits to employees and preferentially recruit Holyoke residents wherever possible. And again, we are plant experts. We love research. We love data. We plan to use our facility to conduct cultivation R&D, help us define what we would consider to be best industry practices and publish that data. We are firm believers in sustainability. Cultivation is a pretty notoriously energy-intensive business. We have partnered with GS Thermal Solutions, the producer of liquid-cooled LED lighting, to install that in our facility, as well as specialized environmental systems, which should help cut our dependence on air conditioning and reduce our energy uses by up to 50% versus traditional grow setups. And the way that works is all lights, even if they're LED, they generate waste heat, but with liquid lines, you're able to move that heat directly from one point to another. That lets us use things in interesting ways to, we could take the heat from a grow room and use it to heat other parts of our area of the building. A very interesting technology. Finally, plants take in a lot of water. They therefore transpire a lot of water that has to be removed. That water vapor needs to be removed with dehumidification. Rather than just draining that to waste, what we plan to do is recapture, recycle, and reuse condensate from our dehumidification systems. And because of the amount of water that comes right back out of the plants, we expect that could reduce our water usage by up to 70%. Waste and odor mitigation practices are critical for any cannabis business, especially cultivation. All of our grow and processing areas will have air scrubbed for nuisance odors by activated carbon filtration. The goal is to not be able to notice any nuisance odors when you pass by the facility or if you're a neighbor resident in the area. We covered a little bit about waste management practices tonight. All of the cannabis waste coming out of our facility will be documented, will be rendered useless or destroyed as per Cannabis Control Commission regulations. We do have plans to keep a locked general waste dumpster on site that will be in our secure chain link fenced off Sally Port. But destroyed and useless cannabis waste, especially odorous kind, should it have that odor, we plan to keep within the building in a secured waste management room until immediately prior to a scheduled removal. A little bit about our community employment and diversity goals. First and foremost, our goal is to hire at least 30% of our workforce directly from the Holyoke community. We also have a goal of roughly half of our workforce being female. Women are, in our experience, traditionally underrepresented in cannabis, and it's one of the large reasons why we wanted to start our own company and kind of make things right, so to speak. We do aim to build a diverse workforce, so one of our goals is to try and reflect the demographic of the community around us and the needs of our customers. Specifically, again, bilingual employees are heavily preferred because we understand that Holyoke is a majority Hispanic community. And finally, we do aim to employ a security force, which again is preferentially comprised of either retired Holyoke police officers or retired police officers from nearby jurisdictions. These are the individuals that are best trained to respond to threats and size-up situations, and we'll work with them on an ongoing basis to make sure that we can implement our security plan as approved by the Holyoke PD. I can run you through a bit of our security and diversion prevention plans, primarily focused on the retail location. Our goal is to make sure that all employees and customers feel safe at all times. And the ways we can get that done, first and foremost, again, implementing and making sure that our security plan on file with the Holyoke PD is constantly updated with anything, any change we make, anything new that we learn. We will
And
have.
that plan is currently approved?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
thank
the letter and special permit, yes. We will have restricted key card access to all employee-only zones, including storage, vaults, offices, cultivation, processing, and delivery areas. There will be on-site security. We will have controlled access at our entrance. There will be multiple ID checks before purchase. We will install high-resolution security surveillance cameras covering all areas of our facility, as well as the parking lot and the building perimeter. We will complete background checks on all employees. That is a requirement for the Cannabis Control Commission agent licensure. We will make sure that the parking lot and building perimeter are well lit at all times. There will be no allowed on-site consumption. All of the products in the dispensary will be kept behind lock and key. There will be no open containers or consumer handling of goods. And we will have alarm systems that will be directly linked to the Holyoke Police Department. Again, there will be no entry granted to minors. This should be a safe and secure operation. All retail customers need to present valid government-issued ID. Before being permitted on the sales floor, they have to be 21 and over. Entry occurs through a vestibule, which will be staffed by Fortree's agent at all times. ID will be checked once more at the point of sale prior to any purchase. We will have no outward-facing window displays, product depictions, or overt cannabis references in our store name or signage. All of the products sold will be in child-resistant containers. Again, full perimeter and video surveillance systems will help us prevent and detect any diversion. All of the access areas to the facility, doors, windows, will be hardened and secured. We will implement a seed-to-sale software system that allows us to track all of our products and plants from first planting to final sale. And all plants and product batches, they receive a metric-compliant RFID tag. That means any harvesting, processing, transportation, and sales will be logged, tracked, recorded to prevent any loss, theft, or diversion, and for full traceability in the event of a recall. A little bit about how we expect to have a positive impact on the community.
I'm going to ask you to just fast forward a little bit,
Yes.
Because I think we understand the positive impact.
Sure.
So I would just like to hear, I see you talking about doing advocacy, and you're teaching 3 classes through the social equity program. And are those classes available online, or how do people access those classes?
So the social equity program itself goes through an application process at the state level. Now, technically, to meet the criteria for application to the social equity program, you need to come from an area that has been disproportionately impacted by the criminalization of marijuana and the war on drugs, of which Holyoke is one. Mm-hmm. They are going through their first round now. We actually had our first cultivation course this last weekend. What we plan to do, this is a demonstration of what we already do with the state, but we are already in discussion with local nonprofits to try and bring additional curriculum very similar to this that can be offered affordably and accessibly, specifically to Holyoke residents. Another one of our goals is to make sure that that curriculum is available, again, in both English and Spanish.
And then,
if I could just add about the structure of the program, it is available 100% online, and then we do have in-person workshops upon the completion of the curriculum. One of the things that we're working on with local nonprofits in Holyoke is translating that into Spanish so that we can present it to the community of Holyoke as well.
Great. And then the workshops would be for a fee, or would they be open, or how?
So those, through the social equity program, it's all inclusive. So it's totally free technical training and assistance for the social equity program. So in that, you get the online curriculum and you get the workshops as well.
Okay, great. Okay, and then I want to just note that the planning staff did feel that this was a very complete application, and I believe, if I could find, I know what the email says, I don't know if I'm going to find it right away.
Today, January 13th.
So I had a communication from the planning staff. I think Jeff Burkott was the one who was reviewing your application.
Yes.
He said that the only thing that was outstanding at this point in time from the planning staff's perspective was that the bike rack seems very far from the entry.
We have talked with Jeff, and we agree it makes a little more sense to bring it to the front of the building. There's actually, in the packet provided to you tonight, I've actually can move that over towards the front of the, near the ADA ramp.
So this, where the bike rack is in the blue, is moved from where it was, or?
From where it was. So in the long form 107-page crazy application, it's over sort of in the corner of the lot. And we agree, it makes more sense, and there is room for it. There's no reason why you couldn't have bikes closer to that front door.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then just so that I understand, so I see cultivation, entrance, and egress, and they are distinct. There's one door for entrance, there's one door for egress on cultivation. I'm not sure if I see where retail entrance egress is.
Sure. So the retail entrance, let's see if I can pull up the image so I can describe a little more accurately. There is a vestibule at the front of the building near the ADA ramp. All the way in the left of the image, I guess close to the bike rack. My version's black and white and barely visible. I guess if the top of the drawing is north, just to the south of the bike rack is where there would be an ADA ramp. That is where we have the customer management system, the man trap, and the main entrance to the retail facility.
And is there like a singular flow of traffic once you're in the building, or can people go in multiple directions?
Well, once you are let onto the retail floor, we do have our checkout counters up on the, again, one of the downfalls of not having the board to point to. So customers walk in, are checked in by our agent, then have access to the retail floor. They again are asked, is this their first time for trees? Have you ordered online? So we can have a retail manager assist them with that experience. We plan to have product displays inside the store, kind of down the middle line. Our goal is to have sort of a counterclockwise flow of customers, where they can make their final purchase at the counter and then leave through that same vestibule man trap.
They're going through the same door?
Yes.
Okay. And so these small doors, I mean, I'm looking at it looks like there's doors on the bottom as well. Or are these separate rooms?
So yes, that is what we have. That's going to be a limited access area where a Fortrees agent only has access to the area behind the counter where they can confirm
so that would be
IDs.
like stock storage.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And then on the right, there's additionally what looks like 1, 2, 3 rooms outside of that main counter area. If I'm
Sure. Actually, I don't in the handout here, just because I wanted to try and keep the image uncluttered, it took out some of the wording. But in the actual site plan, there is a description of the rooms. As you make your way through on the right, that is the retail floor. Kind of looks like a Tetris piece. That is where customers are allowed to go. To the farthest bottom left is a retail manager's office where there'd be administrative work and the ability to be able to do sort of a one-on-one consultation should that be necessary. The rest, again, are storage, stock areas. There is an ADA-compliant restroom in our plans. There is a break room in our plans, and the room farthest north is the current general administrative office for the whole facility, the whole company.
Okay, great. And then finally, what I'm seeing, it looks like at least 2 and possibly, I think it's 2 doors that go from retail into cultivation.
Sure. No, those what we plan to do, again, different employees for different parts of the building will have access based on their level of clearance. We won't really have any employees from retail going into cultivation. To be able to access certain storage room, retail management or company management may need to be able to make those pass-throughs at certain times.
Right.
But again, the specifics of some of those rooms are part of the security plan.
Okay, great. Okay, so that's all set for me. Are there questions from committee members? Councilor Bacon, Councilor Bartley, I see you. I'll put you in queue.
I just have a comment. I just want to make sure that the December 20th letter that you received from DPW will be referenced as one of the conditions that what is stipulated in that letter will be met.
Yes, and we understand also the requirement for the 45-day in advance opening day traffic plan. We understand that.
Traffic mitigation, all
Yeah,
the
and again,
standard things that we're just not able to accurately predict.
It's hard to foresee at this point. It opened up and everybody made a rush to the door and things are settling down. It's hard to tell what's going to happen by then. Even understanding flow of customers to and from the site, we just have to be prepared the best we can.
December 20th.
I was wondering if you had a copy of it on you.
I have it on email.
Let me just make sure. I might have it here. No, that's still 420.
I think everybody had it.
Fortrees, here it is. I have it, thanks. Um,
Okay.
That's
Oh, that
what
was
you
the
gave
paper
us?
copy. So I put it with the wrong one.
Thanks, Bob.
So I have it here. So there's the traffic and parking mitigation plan, as well as the they have to get approval for the creation of new impervious area. Application for permit may be required for future if any existing impervious area is in excess of 2,500 square feet are disturbed, repaid, or otherwise expanded or altered. And so you're clear about that?
Understood, yes.
Okay. Okay. Is there anything else from any committee members? Oh, Council Bartley.
Thank you. Welcome. Before I was a little negligent with the prior applicant, but I will thank you for your commitment and investment into Holyoke. I should have said that to the others. They all think it, but I like to say it as well. I'm sure I know most of us are grateful that you're here, and we appreciate your willingness to be part of the community. I think I heard you say Mr. Casano was here. I can't see him, but I think you, yeah, Mr. Casano, if you come up to the mic, if you would, please. Welcome back.
Thank you. My name is Tom Casano. I'm the owner of the building at 1 Cabot Street and live in the big town of Dunbarton, New Hampshire.
Yeah, we haven't seen you for a few years, but we know you've been here, and it's a committee that I chair and still chair that approved the sale of your building. Just for the newer committee members here, Councilor McGivern will remember, 2015, we had an offer for $10,000 for that building. That was proposed by our planning and economic development team. Fortunately, the three of us that showed up for my meeting rejected that. We rejected that proposal. And then I think you were here in 2017, and at least my records show that you closed on it in November of 18.
Exactly.
Is that about right?
November 5th of 18.
Right, and I believe the sale price was $200,000. Is that correct, Mr.
That's
Casano?
correct.
That's right. Okay, so because of this body, instead of a $10,000 sale, we had a $200,000 sale. I still think it was a pretty good deal for you. I mean, I think you got a pretty small square foot price, but I mean, it was.
I'm not complaining on the price.
I don't think you are. I don't think you are, but and we're not complaining either, because we're happy to have you back, happy to have the building back up and running. So I just like to say that, especially for newer committee members, that they're aware a little bit of the history of that. Fortunately, I keep records. So one thing I do have, Mr. Casano, not to go down memory lane, but just to bring it to the present, how are you doing? I don't want to get into too many details, but how are you doing on that building? Is just rentable square footage is about what, Mr. Casano?
Roughly 200,000 square feet.
All right, and what do we have rented at this stage?
We have signed leases for 2 spaces, totaling about 40 or 50,000 square feet.
Wonderful.
We have a commitment from E&B Natural Ventures, which is going to be growing the vegetables in partnership with the economic development. They're taking 50,000 and possibly 100,000 square feet.
Ms. Casano, that's great news, and again, thank you for your investment into City of Holyoke. It's greatly appreciated. So if we just reference the letter from the city engineer, the parking situation, can't very well park on a bridge. City engineers got concerns about putting a crosswalk, which that's not the first time a city engineer said questions about a crosswalk, in which I disagree. We'll bring up another one again, but that's I get the fact that that's a state highway, but what's our position about finding more parking?
Our vision right now on parking and access to the building is not to really cross the street. There is a gravel lot on the other side, which is private property, so we're not going to direct, our patrons or employees of the buildings to park on somebody else's land. Diagonally across the street, across from the Springfield Photo Mountain building, the one with all the beautiful windows, there's a municipal lot That lot is very, very easily within walking distance, 50 to 100 yards, depending on which end you park at. No crossing the road is required at all. It's all sidewalked right to our building.
Did you say that's a municipal lot?
Yeah.
Mr. Parent, that's a municipal lot?
Yes, it is. The lot directly across the street from GTI. You might recall the council actually, as a condition,
Yeah.
Thank you.
probably a year or so ago, when GTI was approved for their facility on Canal Street, a condition of that approval was for them to work with the city to make some types of improvements to that lot. So the city did, getting off subject, but their GTI maintains a portion of that lot for their non-exclusive use. So it is a municipal lot. It's available to anyone to use at this point.
How many parking spaces do we have?
It's a large lot. It's about 400 feet long by about 100 feet wide, so it's got quite a bit of capacity.
Is it improved? I can't picture it for some
It
reason.
was paved at one point. The gravel, the pavement surface is pretty broken up at this point, so it's kind of in between gravel and pavement at this point.
What point was it paved?
Many years ago, when
Oh,
that
okay,
area
decades
was
ago.
filled. That used to be part of the third level canal, as I understand it, and it was filled at one point. And a parking lot or a lot was created at that point. That DPW has traditionally used part of that lot for snow storage, is one of the uses.
Okay, is that still a long-term plan for snow storage?
It's a convenient location, but we don't use the entire lot. And again, as the city is looking for more and more parking opportunities, that's a very good parking opportunity right now.
Right, so obviously you see where I'm going with this. So do we think we can find other more convenient places to park our snow? And maybe see if we can, I mean, if that's a solution for a private company, is to park for free on a gravelly municipal lot, yeah, that's a non-starter for me. I don't, I appreciate the fact that they're here. Don't get me wrong, I said thank you about 3 times already, but, you know, using a free municipal lot for an extended period of time, I don't think that's the way, we should go. So it would be my hope, my hope that you'd work with Mr. Marrero and some others to figure out a better way to either, you know, improve it or sell it or something like that. Would you consider it an eyesore, Mr. Parent, at this point? If I just drove up to it now, or is it an attractive lot, or is there all weeds around there? What's it?
I would say it's what you would expect a gravel parking lot to look like. It's not overgrown. It is maintained. It is mowed. But it's a parking lot in a relatively industrial setting in the city, and it looks like that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Casano, is that a lot that so how far is that from your building?
Roughly 150 feet. But I would like to point out that is not needed by us at this time.
I'm not looking to
Possibly
sell it to
something
you.
in the future development of the building could require that, but we have more than ample parking now for this tenant that's applying and the tenants that we have signed up. And should we need to make any improvements to the parking lot, we would, go to the DPW to make sure we did it correctly. The parking lot is fully paved. In the haste of the auction that was held there by the former tenant in April and removal by mid-May, some significant damage was done by the scrap companies. Some of them were from New York City, came up and they were taking out machines, and they really didn't care what they did to our property. So we have some repair work, some patching that's got to be done, and we'll measure it up to see if that comes under those guidelines. But the parking lot itself's in really good shape. I haven't counted the number of parking spaces we have, but Bob, do you know how many parking spaces we have available at this point? I think we did a rough count, but there's well in excess, double or triple what the requirement is right now.
Your lot?
Yep. So there's significant on-site parking.
Triple for the current tenants that you have signed
Yes.
with leases? Thank you.
Okay, but is that including this proponent?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they basically, we're going to have one retail at this location. It's going to be them. The retail parking, I was listening to the prior conversation about having multiple tenants and having the right number of spaces, but not designated for, anybody could use them. These parking spaces for their retail are designated and only for that retail. No other people in the building are allowed to use those spaces. Those are their retail spaces. They're located right in the front of the building. Any other occupants, tenants, employees will be on the side parking lot and away from the retail parking spaces.
I'll just point out, in, I think in Mr. Parent's letter, I'm making the date somewhere, December 20th, I think he puts in bold, in anticipation of parking demands continuing to increase, we recommend the building owner develop a master plan for allocating their on-site parking spaces. So it's in his letter.
Yeah, we haven't really got a full master plan yet. We have designated areas for future parking, for future tenants. Not knowing what the tenants are yet, we don't know what those requirements are, so we didn't specifically say this is for, second floor rear, because we don't know if that person is going to have 20 employees or 2 employees, so we have to wait and see what the business is that comes along. We know with like Eddie's grow, a lot of it's going to be automated. He'll employ as many people as he needs to, and part of his goal is to employ a lot of disadvantaged people that he can train, because when you're doing cannabis cultivation, you need a certain amount of expertise and people that can be highly trained to do it properly. Growing vegetables is a much simpler process, much more forgiving. Still have to have a certain amount of training, because anytime you grow indoors, I've learned a lot more about growing indoors than I ever thought I would want to know. Mold, mildew, spider mites, aphids, there's all this stuff that can happen indoors that doesn't so much happen outdoors. Although if you've ever grown tomatoes in your garden and they get tomato blight, you're done, so they're gone. So there's things that happen indoors that are accelerated versus happening outdoors. So the management of any cultivation, whether it's for marijuana, whether it's for tomato plants or other herbs and spices, has got to be done meticulously. It's got to be done right. So they will hire and pay people higher than minimum wage or average wage, because they need good quality people. They've got to be trainable. They've got to make sure that they're responsible for what they're doing. We have found that in talking with numerous people, we've worked with the economic department. John Dijak, Marcos have been great to work with. Tim Murphy from River Valley Realty, who's a local guy here for all his life, is our real estate agent. And he's worked with dozens of people who have come to talk to us. And 99% of them just don't qualify as who we want for a tenant in our building. We are thrilled to have 4 Trees here, because these are the type of quality people that just don't come along every day. They go beyond what the minimum requirement is. They set the bar for other people to follow. So we're just very excited about the opportunity to have such a quality person in the building, because that's what attracts more quality people. And to give you a little bit of background on what's going on with the building, because not much looked like it happened until they cleaned the brick on the outside. Last May, we took possession of the building about May 15th. So we were actually allowed to go on our own building on May 15th. Prior to that, we only could go in with permission. I'm not sure why, but that's the way it was. When Specialty Loose Leaf had the auction, some of the stuff had been there since the late 1800s, mid 1900s. It was obsolete inventory that was just dead inventory. And when they had the auction, about 75% of the stuff did not sell. So we came to a settlement, took over the building, and we had to dispose of that 75% of the contents of the building at our expense. So we have pulled out 75 to 100 construction dumpsters full of junk out of the building, and we've got it cleaned out, and it looks great. So we had to put all the emphasis on getting that cleaned out, then coordinated with the sandblasting company that cleaned the outside of the brick. Just beat the weather. There were days that the hoses froze up and they couldn't work. We've got some sample windows. One sample window that came in, we didn't like the way it looked, so we've got another one coming. So as soon as the weather warms up, we'll be tackling the windows, and all of a sudden you're going to see this massive transformation that looks like it's going to take place overnight, because that's our goal, is to really make it look good. So we've been working on the inside out. We love the building. We think that it's, one of the nicest mill buildings in town, and when we get done, it's going to look like it. And having quality people in a quality building just is what we want for Holyoke, because that's just starts the ball rolling.
Yeah, that's great, Ms. Castano. So thank you, Ms. Castano. Appreciate that and all that you're doing and continue to do. Ms. Goldman, where are we in the process for applying to the Control Commission?
Actually, our CCC application, we anticipate going in on Thursday. So we have a little bit of waiting before that's done at the state level.
Okay, so I don't really know much about how that process works, but I did hear the prior applicant say that he does, and he doesn't expect to get in for months yet, and he's been in months before.
It does take a little while. We put a lot of thought. We've got an 80-page management and operations profile, and we wanted to make sure, especially that our local efforts, how we wanted to actually reach out to the community for the plan to impact areas of disproportionate impact. We wanted to make sure that was everything was correct. We wanted to make sure that the city wanted us here. But yes, it does take a little while longer. It does seem that they're finally starting to pick up the pace just a little bit now that the final regs, I believe, were issued in September. Their goal was to staff up. I'd be lying if I told you anybody knew exactly how long that would take. The best we can do.
Well, I heard you say the fall, but
Yes,
that might be aggressive, but that's okay. We're speculating, so I get it. Number of employees, either on the retail or the cultivation side? Do we have a guess on that?
The cultivation or the retail?
Both.
Okay, so we're thinking combined 19 to 24. We're a pretty small cultivation, even though it takes up that 14,500 square feet. The actual canopy size starting out is about 3,800 square feet. So it is the smallest at the state level. Again, 9 to 12 in cultivation, and I think 10 to 12 is what we believe for retail at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Council Murphy and then Council
Yeah. Again, you heard me talking about parking. Here, I'm going to talk about traffic flow.
Sure.
Because Cannabis Street is first of all, you got a traffic light where you end up, especially during busy times of the day where you got a lot of traffic. Am I correct that the parking spaces are directly off of Cannabis Street?
Yes. You pull into the lot, and that's its own lot for the property.
So, I guess this would also go to the owner, but let me tell you, I'm very familiar with this building, because when I was a young man, just a few years ago, I actually worked in this building and several of the other buildings for 4 summers while I was working my way through college. And when I was working there, I didn't think it was such a nice building, but I'm glad you think it is. But I'm just wondering, because I know at one point, National Blank Book Building was here, there was a warehouse back there, and then this one, and there was basically and I don't know who owns it now, but I'm assuming you probably own it on the what would be the northerly side of your building. Is there a potential of any parking over there?
Let me get oriented to north.
Yeah, no, but I'm not here with that.
You come to town.
I know which way the cold wind blows in the wintertime.
Yeah, this is technically north, and again, sorry, this is the least resolution on any picture ever was.
So if I was taking a left, coming from Holyoke, taking a left on Cannabis Street to get into where your parking is now, I would be going north.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so let's
So I'm
kinda
looking
do
at
this.
the other side of your building. I'm just wondering if there's another way of having entries to the parking so that I can honestly, especially if you're busy,
Yeah,
can see a major traffic jam building up on Cannabis Street and on South Canal Street.
On the north side is train tracks, and they are somewhat elevated. So for us to say that we could park on the other side of the tracks or have access over the tracks into our parking is not going to happen.
Okay.
And we are aware of the traffic on Cabot Street, especially the loose leaf was kind of like they go to work and park there for the good part of the day. They had a lot of trucks delivery. Trucks getting in and out, large trucks, tractor trailers is much more difficult. I have found, because I'm going in and out of there quite frequently, sometimes 4 or 5 times in a day, that sometimes when the traffic is the most intense is when people are the most courteous. And, you don't always find that, but if you pull out and you put your signal on and you wait, 3 or 4 cars go by, somebody stops and lets you out. And I think they realize that it's a difficult intersection. Whereas because the light is within 50 feet of that driveway, people stop. If you're going to turn left, they'll stop and leave you access to turn. Mm-hmm. The only thing that sometimes is difficult if you're going towards Chicopee is you've got people turning right at the light, coming in, accelerating quickly. So you've got these people will stop, but then you've got to negotiate to make a left turn. We don't know which way the traffic will come and go for the most part, but that driveway is not ideal for access off of Cabot Street. But there is the other side of the road is several businesses and buildings, and they have numerous employees. What's the name of the company makes the puzzles? Ederon has sometimes 4 or 5 to 10 trucks per hour, tractor trailers that turn into the lot, make deliveries, and come back out, and they're doing it very successfully. I've never seen anybody sit there a minute or two at the most. And now we have a train that goes right across in front of the building. They reactivated those tracks. It's only, Tuesday and Thursday, I think, that the train goes by, but it's pretty exciting for us. Because the train tracks are there, every bus that comes along, not commercial vehicles, but ambulances, anybody that's got to stop at the tracks, they stop. And when they stop, they put their flashers on, and then you turn. They actually make a little traffic light for you. And there are quite a few buses that go through there, so that does create an opportunity to get out in traffic. Like I say, it's less than ideal, but I've seen access that's much, much worse than that to get in and out of. But part of it, you are relying a little bit on the courtesy of the drivers, and they are local people, so they tend to be more courteous.
Yeah, and hopefully that is an accurate portrayal of people's driving. But I do know, based on what I'm hearing, we're going to end up with quite a few more trips going in and out than what we have currently.
Yes.
And so
I would say there would be a significant increase as of what's there today. If you go back maybe 20 years when that was really a thriving business, there would probably be no more, possibly even less than there was in the past, because there used to be, well, I'm not sure how many people were there when you were there, but there could be 100, 150 people, plus delivery trucks, tractor trailers. So that was a very, very active way. So it's kind of fallen by the wayside a little bit, and we're going to kind of bring it back up to the activity level.
So I did note that you're looking at potentially having additional parking on that far side, I think.
Yes, we do have. There's quite a lot of space over there.
And again, I don't want anybody getting run over by a train. But if there's any way of creating more parking where they would come out onto Canal Street rather than come out onto Cannabis Street.
Yes,
Canal Street, I would think there's some traffic, but certainly not what there is on Cannabis Street. So and again, I don't want anybody going over train tracks and getting run over.
Well, it's either that or you got to jump the moat, because we have the canal in front of us, Cabot Street on this side, the river on the back side, and the train tracks on that side. So we're kind of in a castle, looks like a castle, but we're surrounded by only one driveway access. And the train tracks they've got to be elevated 5 or 6 feet.
Yeah.
So it's a very sharp banking up and down. So that side would be possibly something in the future. If it becomes an issue, we could go to the Amtrak or whoever's in charge of the railroad tracks, and probably in somebody else's lifetime not get approval.
Okay. And let me also say, I was very happy to hear you say EMB in the vegetable operation. I know we had the special permit, and we were really encouraging them. So I'm real happy that you've got that worked out with them.
Yeah, I've been working very closely with him for quite a few months. He's also at another location. He's getting a cultivation license, and he's kind of waiting for that to come along so he can get going on everything at the same time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Councilor McGivern.
Thank you. Tom, if you could hang around for a minute. Sure. Both my question or thoughts are both for you as Tom as the landlord and for the petitioner. And welcome back. And I think everybody said it, but we're glad that you're not only here but making a great go of it. It's a large building. you have a number of tenants to, to do what your goals are. The 18,000 square foot that Four Leaf is looking at, can you walk me through what shared accesses inside the building there are, freight elevators, egresses, and what security is going to be between your other tenants in this highly regulated business?
The way the buildings were built, going back historically, the building along the river was built first. The building along the train tracks was built second. The building towards the canal was built third. The Cabot building, which is like the two-story part, was built last building of the four, and then the courtyard was in the middle. That was filled in. So over the course of 50 or 60 years, they were added together. So when you go inside the building, it's like you're walking into four different buildings. It's not a big open space. It's kind of cobbed up into different spaces. The Cabot room, which is a big clear span, 10,000 square foot room, they're taking, and the offices that are in the front will become their retail store. So essentially what we're going to do is wall off the Cabot. There's indoor windows, arched brick windows, brick walls, so those will be filled in, and that will be completely segregated from the rest of the building. From the loading docks coming into their space, again, it's a separate building. It'll be completely walled off. So they will not have access into the rest of the building, and the rest of the building will not have access into there, just like they're condoed and completely separate construction.
Tom, does that include basement, any upper floors, any?
Yeah.
Terry Murphy told me there were a lot of secret passages he used to take his naps while he was working there. But
I heard there were some tunnels, but I haven't found those yet. Yes, there will probably, there are several stairways because of the way the buildings were built back then. You had the towers, and the towers were the staircases on the external wall of the building. This has 3 elevator shafts in it. None of those stairways or elevators come up into their space. Okay. So they will be completely segregated from all the other floors.
Okay. And I understand that you're satisfied with the parking requirements, and I'm sure you understand the zoning ordinances and everything as they go for all your tenants.
Sure.
But just in case down the road, if there is a demand for, some additional parking, the municipal monthly parking pass rate is very reasonable, and we certainly can take care of that lot for you.
Yeah, I think that we get to the point where we start to fill the building up and we have that kind of a problem. That's a great problem to have, because that means that we've got good tenants, we've got good cash flow, we've got income. We can not only do things with the property that you're not able to do when you're just shelling money out and nothing's coming in. And then at that point we can approach the city and say, hey, we would like to fix up one municipal lot, we'd like to pave the sidewalks, we'd like to make some improvements that will benefit us and benefit the city at the same time. And I don't see that being too far away. It should take, might take another 2 years. I'd like to say it would take 2 months, but it took us 2 years to get to this point. So it does take some time, especially when you're dealing with a building that large. But yeah, we have no problem with, continuing off-site improvements to benefit the use of the building, because that, as a landlord, and as Tim Murphy would say, as the rental agent, you can't put a business in if they can't park. So we have to address that issue to bring in the tenant. So it's not something that we would try to stuff somebody in and GM the parking. The tenant's going to dictate to us, this is what we need for parking, and you have to make it available to them.
I'm sure the city would work with you on the parking if you would help us, the city, on the outdated traffic signals at the corner there.
Yes, it's my understanding that part of the Riverwalk project is coming down and meeting the Chicopee Bridge at some point. I'm not sure what the timing is. Marcos told me, but I forgot over the last 2 years. When that happens, that intersection, the sidewalks, everything will be upgraded, and I would assume the parking signals will probably improve as well. I mean, the traffic signals. You might have noticed, I think it was on the cover of the packet he handed out, we have a 1953 picture of that intersection. I think they're the same traffic lights. I don't think
they are.
They built them to last back then. The only difference is, in that picture, there's a policeman in a box in the middle of the intersection. which I don't think you would have today. I don't think you'd get anybody standing in a box in the center of the intersection to direct traffic. But what was interesting with that picture, and I'm going to steal the show for another minute, get me talking about the building, is you see the windows in the building in that picture. And that's the first picture I found that has all the original windows all around the building. We found some, photographs from the air and stuff that you couldn't quite see what the windows were. But that's what our finished product goal is. We want it to look just like that.
Nice.
So when we saw that picture, I sent it to Dijak, and I sent it to Marcos, and I sent it to Tim. I said, look, there's our building. There's the windows that we're going to have. And like I say, I'm jealous of the Springfield Photo Mount building because I walk out and I look over at their windows and I go, man, I want those windows just like that. Because the character of the buildings back then was, you had some ornamental brickwork and, some really beautiful architecture. But 50% or more of the wall space of every building is the windows. And they put a lot of money and a lot of effort into making the buildings, windows look like it belonged in the building. And that's what we want to replicate. You can put plywood up, you can put sheet metal roofing on, and it just looks awful, no matter how you try to dress it up. So that's our goal. Our sample window, the first one came in, didn't cut the mustard. So we're getting another one, so we're going to make sure it's perfect before we buy 400 windows.
It was 150 just on the fourth floor.
Yeah, fourth floor is 150, so you do that times 3, probably about 500 windows. So we're gonna spend $500,000 on just those windows, and it's got to be perfect because I'm not going to spend $500,000 and say, well, I wish we'd put one more grid on it, or I wish we'd done this. So we're going to get it. They're going to go in rapid fire order. But when we get done, that's what we want the building to look like. We want it to look beautiful. The lighting is going to be extraordinary. I mean, it's just we're very excited about finally removing somebody else's trash to get to the point where we can now start working on the building.
It's a great goal, and we appreciate your efforts. But do me a favor and check out those tunnels, because there is a tunnel in this building that goes under Dwight Street, and it leads to what was the old Bud. And it was a tunnel that was used during Prohibition by a number of people who worked in this building to get to the old Bud. That's a true story.
Tim Murphy has told me some stories about how the tunnels would go to certain bars in town, and yeah.
They're there.
They're there.
Anyone else? Is there anyone from the public who'd like to speak in favor or against this proposal? Seeing none, I have one last question. So you describe yourself as a blue-collar startup, and so I wanted to know where the blue-collar aspect comes from.
I can answer that one. So we use the terminology blue collar because we come from the industry. So we have worked our way up from the trim room to cultivation tech to the harvest manager to the director of cultivation to the director of R&D. So our understanding of the industry comes from being in it since 2014. So we're not big multi-state operators. This is who we are.
Great, thank you so much for that. Okay, public hearing is closed. Is there? Oh, sorry, we need a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make that motion.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
Would you recognize as making the motion? I'll second it.
The motion has been made and seconded to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So is there a motion then to adopt with the conditions?
So moved.
Okay, so so there's a motion that's been made to pass the special permit with the conditions. I'll read the conditions so that we're all on the same page. It's the 6 that we normally do. Sorry, they're over here. That the owner always pay commercial taxes, that the establishment retain a minimum of 30% Holyoke employees, and I saw that was part of your proposal and application. So you did your homework to understand who we were and what we were looking for from our applicants. So I appreciate that. Hiring preferences given to Holyoke residents also included in their own application. No marijuana consumption on site. No delivery to consumers, and the hours of operation would be within the ordinance regulations. Okay. In addition to that, we want to make sure that you comply with the engineer's letter of December 20th. This is it, yeah. You're in possession of this letter from the 20th, correct?
Yes.
And so the first item refers to the stormwater regulations and how a permit may be required if improvements are made to the impervious areas. That the applicant should be required to locate and verify the condition of the existing service of sanitary sewer service and confirm that it's separate from any roof or storm drains prior to the application for a building permit. So I think we heard about some of the parking demands as the building continues to be re-tenanted. So there's the recommendation, not the exact requirement of the landlord, that a master plan for allocating the parking spaces on site is created. And then the fourth item here is that the applicant shall submit a traffic and parking mitigation plan to the engineer 45 days in advance of beginning retail sales. I didn't see if you had yet an opening day plan, or is that just too far down the line?
Well, it is a little far down the line, but we have met with Captain Moriarty and Steve Norton. Our plan is to hire a Holyoke PD road job officer at the very least on opening day to make sure everything goes as smoothly as possible, and we'll assess with them on an ongoing basis whether that is still needed.
Okay, so you already had that conversation. Great. Okay, so
Madam
then
Chair?
on, yes?
Just one thing, I think it
In the
closed,
microphone, Council Bartley?
yeah, I think it closed the whole hearing, but not that I care, but I didn't hear from the applicants saying that they needed an armed guard.
Actually, we were required by the same mandate that our colleagues had about the armed guard.
Is that in their letter, Madam Chair? Is it?
I don't believe that it is, so I think we should request a letter from Captain Moriarty to explain why this seems different than previous applications. But I don't think that's the business per se of the applicant. I think it's our request for information from our police force. Okay, so then on the motion to grant the special permit with the 7 conditions, the 6 typical, and then compliance with the letter dated December 20th from our city engineer, Bob Parent, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0, so moved. Thank
Thank
you. And again, this will go before our full city council next Tuesday, and we'll know then the outcome. Thank you. So I'm going to suspend the necessary rules, or entertain a motion to suspend the necessary rules to take up a few items out of order. Councilor Bacon, do you want to work on item 9 first?
Yes, that would be great. So motion to suspend the rules and go to item 9.
Second it.
Motion has been made and seconded to suspend the necessary rules and continue out of order to item number 9. Bob, we're going to deal with some of these traffic issues, and then we'll probably take a break and then come back to them. But I think number 9 is a traffic item. So why don't we have you come in? You can leave it open. Oh, you have one?
All right, got it.
David, do you want one of these outlines from Bob?
Amanda's prepared.
Okay.
At my young age. At my young age.
Terry, do you mind passing this over to Joe? Maybe he did. Okay, so item number 9 is an order filed by Councilor Bacon that the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit be posted on Evergreen, Bray Park Drive, and Meadowbrook at locations determined by the DPW. And we have a memo from the engineer. Bob, do you want to go ahead and talk about the recommendation that you're making here?
Certainly. The first part, and you've heard this a couple of times before, there are really 2 ways to address posting the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit. It could be a speed limit that's adopted by ordinance. If that's the case and it's a posted speed limit, the enforcement mechanism is different than if it's the citywide 25-mile-per-hour speed limit that you see driving into Holyoke where the general signs are. The posted speed limit can be enforced with a radar gun from a stopped vehicle, et cetera. The citywide speed limit can only be enforced by actually monitoring the speed of a vehicle over a distance. So basically following a vehicle to confirm the distance.
And there's not enough distance.
Interesting thing, and every time I get a new order coming up, I always go back to the ordinance tables and say, okay, what's already there? Because many times there's already something there. So I found out in that case that in fact there are already speed limit restrictions on Evergreen Drive in both directions. They're not posted on the street today. I have no idea why they're not posted on the street, but what the ordinance table says is it basically says that there are supposed to be 3 levels of speeds, 20, 25, and 30 miles per hour, posted on Evergreen Drive. As I said, it's not currently posted. So we can handle that a couple of different ways. We can put those speed limit signs back up.
Yes,
The interesting thing is if we put those speed limit signs back up, it'll be posted for 30 miles per hour, which is actually greater than the citywide speed limit, because the posted speed is what takes precedent over the citywide speed limit.
I'm looking at 20 and 25.
If you look at page 5 out of 6, the first 2 lines that have the all caps Evergreen Drive northbound, Evergreen Drive south, that's what is posted. That's in the ordinance table today.
Yeah, and that's 20 miles an hour.
It starts at 20,
Okay.
then it goes to 30 for most of the distance, and then drops back down to 25.
Right, but under our current ordinance, then it would all be 25.
Again,
If we bring it into compliance.
You would
which
have
is-
to actually remove that posted speed first to then make the citywide speed limit take effect.
That is the goal.
But you have a couple of options. Since you already have an entry in the ordinance table, maybe you just simplify that entry and say, we're going to make all of Evergreen 25 as a posted speed, since a posted speed already exists.
Okay, that's what I would
Since that decision had been made years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and put the signs up, as they perhaps should be there today.
Yep, that
So-
sounds good.
That's one option. And then, I'm not, as you've heard before, I'm not a big fan of putting signs up everywhere just to
Right.
put signs up. That said, you could address Bray, Park, and Meadowbrook if you wanted to differently. You could, at the beginning of those 2 streets, put a citywide sign up. That citywide sign doesn't require a entry in the ordinance table, because that's already part of the city ordinances, but the enforcement mechanism, again, is different. So effectively, for the short roadways that lead up to Evergreen, they could be under the citywide limit and citywide enforcement, and for the longer section of Evergreen itself, which is more of the straightaway, that could be under a posted speed. Or it could all be under the citywide limit, which again is more challenging to enforce.
Under discussion, Councilor Bacon.
So the reason that I filed the order was because under the discussion on Bemis, it was stated that if we went by the citywide, that the enforcement would be almost impossible. So that's why I filed the order for these streets. I very much appreciate you doing the research, because I did not know there were already the limitations that should have been posted. And while I do agree, sign everywhere a sign is not the greatest plan, when there's a very short distance for compliance, which would not be able to be achieved, then I think we have to do the signs. Having said that, originally, and I may have misunderstood, but my original request was to put the citywide sign at the end of Bray Park, and I was led to understand that those were used just for the entry points of the city and that it wouldn't be available for a street such as Bray Park. But if it is, that, in that regard, was my original request. So I would be happy to try that for Bray Park and Meadowbrook to see if it has an impact, and then come back later for signs if the people say, oh, that didn't help at all. But I would very much like the committee to recommend to put the signage per ordinance for the ordinance that's 20 and 25, and to change the ordinance where it says 30 to 25. And in my original order, I'd said the signage as you determined. You know, because I don't know, I mean, but what would be most effective? So to me, that would be a win-win.
Sure.
To try it as a first step.
I'd suggest a slight variation of that. If the citywide limit of 25 is going to apply coming onto Bray Park and coming onto Meadowbrook,
Yeah.
that we don't attempt to drop the speed to 20 just to bring it
Oh, for
back
the
up to 25.
.11? So, okay, so we would change the ordinance that says 20 to 25. We would change the one that says 30 to 25.
Correct. And
Okay.
that's what I've written on this
Yep.
sheet with that suggestion.
Right,
The
I
two
see.
second entries that you see for Evergreen are making the entirety of Evergreen a posted 25-mile-per-hour speed limit.
Okay,
Again, given that it's already posted, all we're trying to do is really tweak what's already there.
Okay, no,
versus
that-
creating something that's
right,
new.
rather than creating, that works. It accomplishes the goal.
And that's probably the area where the greatest speeding might occur, again, on the straightaway on Evergreen. So if the police department is able to conduct enforcement, that's probably the better place to place a vehicle on a driveway with a radar
Right,
gun to
right,
try
and
to
that's the
bring speeds down.
Problem there, because it's close, but it's short, so there's no ability to do a length of time to prove the speed.
Right.
Thank you very much for that. So I'm warm to doing it the simplest way. So you believe the simplest way is to change Evergreen Drive in the current ordinance to 25 in all the existing ordinances, and to post the citywide one at the end of Bray Park and the end of Meadowbrook at Homestead.
That's correct.
So I make that as a motion.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. I believe that Councilor McGivern wanted to weigh in on this decision and then, or discussion rather. And then Bob, did you also want to respond?
I was just going to make the one general comment that unfortunately speed limit signs much of the time turn into just a suggestion. Particularly the citywide speed limit signs where there isn't enough length on that section of the roadway to even enforce
Right.
them the way, so it may have an effect, it may not have an effect.
Right.
And I do have a question about that. Forgive me, Councilor McGivern.
You're forgiven.
So even though it's a hybrid sign that talks about 25-mile-per-hour zone that is somewhat indicating the citywide speed limit, it doesn't function as a posted speed limit sign where you could do radar enforcement?
It doesn't, because that citywide speed limit is governed by a state statute that is different than a posted speed state statute. The means that you can enforce that citywide is only by basically following a vehicle for at least an eighth of a mile. And an eighth of a mile, unfortunately, gets you all the way down Bray Park and all the way down, almost all the way down Meadowbrook.
Right, and that's the reason I filed the order the way that I did.
So,
Because it's been a chronic and repeated issue for as long as I've been on the council.
Thanks. And then Councilor McGivern.
Thank you. Bob, first, thank you for honoring the posted speed limit, agreement when we did go to the 25 miles an hour, which one city councilor didn't vote for, but I certainly am in agreement that Evergreen, especially Evergreen, should be 25 miles an hour, and Bray Park and Meadowbrook are very similar and should be 25 miles an hour, and I think your proposal makes the most sense, and I agree with Councilor Bacon. I think one of the reasons that the signs are not up, and the reason we had the 3 different speed limits, if I remember years ago, was to curb the cut-through traffic as much as the speed limit. And we also put up speed humps. It was one of the first streets we had speed humps on. And when we saw Evergreen, it was not just repaved, I think it was almost taken down to grade level, and new berms were put in, and some parts of the road were widened. I think that's when the signs came down and the speed humps came out. What is the status of the speed humps for Evergreen?
that I don't know. I wasn't aware of the history, so minimally I'll go back and I'll double check the ordinance table to see, do they exist in the ordinance table? Sorry.
I wasn't sure, I was just
The
curious.
answer. It does exist in ordinance, and I've been in communication with Mike McManus. It's supposed to be done this year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know some people on Evergreen are going to be happy to hear that.
For 10 years, they've been
I wasn't
wanting
going
it
to say
back.
that, but you did.
I've been working on it. The speed hump, yeah.
Okay, then, so then, I think that there's been a motion that's been made and seconded to adopt the second option in the engineer's recommendations, which posts for the full length of Evergreen Drive, both north and southbound, a 25-mile-per-hour sign, as well as installing the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit in thickly settled or business district zones at the entrance of Meadowbrook from Homestead and at Bray Park Drive from Westfield. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved.
Thank you.
Okay.
Motion to go out of order and take up item 11, please.
Motion has been made and seconded to proceed out of order to item number 11. All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Under discussion, Counselor Bacon.
So at our last meeting, we had discussed this, and we were going to look at utilizing the language for the other study committee that we have in effect. And so I think we have the language for that has been sent out to all of us. And I just want to reiterate that the purpose of this committee would be a study committee. It is not intended in any way to be the official committee that would be appointed by the mayor at a later date once the letter is sent in and the formal process begins. But it would be a committee to review the November 18th letter sent by Receivers Reich.
And I think he resent it to the full city council.
I sent it to the full council because for some reason it had just been given to me. I think it more appropriately would have been submitted as a communication to the entire council. But I think that letter serves as a reference point for the broader community to be able to take a look at and to provide perspective, expertise, and information to what will become a formal committee down the road. And so I would like to ask the committee to move this to city council because we'll be going into February and we need to get the committee going so that it will have time to actually look at the various options, bring in people who might have expertise to inform, so that we have a more open and transparent process for the full community as we go forward.
Anyone else like to speak on this? Counselor McGivern?
I'm curious as to who will be making the appointments to this committee.
I would see that we would do it in the model of the study committee that we have done for the reservoir. That we would list certain members, and then we amended it so that there could be 2 additional members most recently, that ordinance. That's the one that I'm referring to.
And if I remember, this full city council made the appointments after interviews.
It's true, yeah. Counselor, go ahead.
And if we could suspend the rules, if Crystal would correct me if I've got anything wrong on that. But it's my understanding.
I don't have the reservoir language in front of me, so I don't know off the top of my head.
Did you provided it, right, today?
I don't think I saw that. I thought we were just going to have a bit more discussion on the makeup of the committee also. So I don't know if I'm ready to move this forward to the full body.
I'd like to make a motion to table.
The problem with continuing to table it is that then there will be no time for the broader input from the community. And we will end up in a similar situation to the first process, which did not end well. So I think there's been a strong voice from our voters, and there was strong representation from all throughout the community and people that want to be heard moving forward. And I think it would be wise of us to listen to our constituents and let them have a voice, to keep tabling this is just going to simply run out the clock, and so then it won't happen, and then we'll be right back where we were. So I respectfully request that we move it. I had listed out certain people in my order that would be included, but I also stipulated that it would not be limited to that. So it is not intended to limit who could be on it, but just to make sure that it's representative, so that if we are in a situation where something has to go to a vote again, the public will have had an open process in this regard. So in my order, I have said the mayor, the receiver, school committee member, city council member, small business owner, large business owner, parent with children in the public schools, a renter, a senior citizen, a teacher, and to try to make it representative of all the wards in the city. And so my goal is to make it representative. This is a study committee. It's something the city council has used as a tool historically to bring in diverse ideas, perspectives, and expertise. And that's the goal of this. To delay it will essentially be to deny it.
So, Councilor Bartley, did I see your hand up at all?
I'll raise my hand.
I thought I did
didn't
see
have
you.
it up, but I'll
Have
raise
your
my
hand
hand. But I don't want to, is Councilor Bacon, you set? Because I don't want to.
I'm set.
Okay, I raised my, yeah, okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, I hear councilors say they want to table it. I'm getting that. I mean, to what end? When you could recommend that you send it to legal, to put into legal form, then you have a chance to think about it and debate it instead of just tabling it. Because the way it was done before with a study, with the study committee, I mean, again, this is another history lesson. We approved, and we sent a statement of interest to the MSBA. We approved one building and went back to that study committee and it morphed into two buildings. And voila, November, whatever the date of the ballot was, it was vaporized. And it was a black mark for everybody. That model doesn't work. I think what the councilor is attempting to do, I didn't sign on to this, but I appreciate the spirit of the order. Because the council, I'm not speaking for anybody, but wants to see if we can move this forward with a community engagement instead of the disaster that was put out before us. We sent a statement of interest, one building to Boston. Everybody's on board with that. This group that the mayor put together, with six of them from the engineers or from Fontaine Brothers, morphed into two buildings at double the cost. Well, you got what you deserved. So that's the history behind it. So I think if you send it to legal, send it back to committee, you can still, it's almost like tabling it, but you get a chance to think about it for some more. Hopefully that'll help. I doubt it.
Councilor Anderson Burgos.
Yeah, so we had a group of people who did a study, and the study came back that two schools were needed to fit the needs of this community. So I don't feel we need to rush into this because there is not a time, there's no clock. Well, I'd like to second it, and that's my opinion.
Councilor Murphy and then Councilor McGivern.
Yeah, let me, I've talked to Dr. Drake after I got the options, and I like the idea of a balanced, as much as possible, a balanced committee to study the various options that he has put forward. It's also my understanding, and I filed an order, which will be coming up this week, that we as a city still have some obligations, and that potentially, if we live up to our obligations, we might be able to get some additional information, which might be more supportive from the MSBA, but that is still questioned. But I do think with the documentation that Dr. Drake has provided, we have all kinds of options. Clearly, we don't know what we can fund, what we can get financial support from MSBA. But I do think we should start looking at all those options, and I would strongly suggest that we need to know very shortly what we're doing for the school year in September, as well as what we're doing for the future year's references. And, I think we need to act. Whatever we're going to do, however we're going to do it, I think we need to act. I think we need to all be on board with that action. We're going to have differences. We're going to have differences of opinions. But eventually, if we talk things through and we hear all the various options, I think we're going to come to the best solution that we can. So, I do think that's what this order is about. And again, I'm confident that we can respectfully disagree, and then come up to a conclusion and try to find the right answer. And nothing's going to be perfect, but we need to find out what we're going to do. And again, right now, we don't know what's happening in September, because we know we're not having a new building by September, one way or the other. We know we're not having that. So that's option number one.
But I think are you chair? I'm sorry, or just on the Joint Schools Committee? So that sounds like something that we should have Dr. Drake in for, regardless of the school buildings.
I am planning on doing that with him, and he did indicate, but right now he's still trying to work out some other things. There is another order which will be going to that committee, which he will come in to try to make sure we get all the documentation that we need to provide to the MSBA. And he's asked me to file that as well. So.
Okay, thanks. Councilor McGivern.
The issue at hand, and I said was, when this order was first came before the city council, is there's nothing wrong with creating as a matter of fact, it's a good thing creating a study committee to look at the options and to allow the public to have input on something that's very important to this city. And I agree with that. But we can't influence this study committee with all of our own prejudices as far as this project went or didn't go. Because every voter had their own reason for why they voted against the override, which is only one component of this entire process. That was the paying for it. I don't care what we do. Until the Commonwealth of Massachusetts wakes up and gets rid of the construction cap, we're not going to be able to afford anything. I mean, that was the key issue in the override vote, was the construction cap that has increased over the years, over the last 5 years, twofold. So if we want to create a study committee, I said it and I'll say it again, the makeup is the most important. We need people that are going to come to the table with ideas, not rehash what happened or what didn't happen or why it didn't happen. The city council voted to go to 2 schools. We allowed the building committee and the schools to amend the plan back in 2018. We voted for additional monies to be put into the $1.3 million to complete their study. Now, instead of rehashing it, let's go forward. Let's find people that can bring good ideas to the table, and let's start working with the Commonwealth. I mean, I don't get it, because they reworded Chapter 70 for all the issues that apply to a gateway community and have done the right thing in terms of money coming in to pay for things such as special needs, special education, things that are very costly to communities and gateway communities themselves, and to help out in the budget that area. They're advertising for a receiver at $250,000. That's their employee. We've never paid a superintendent over $150,000. But they put a construction cap on building a school that we need so that we can correct the real problem, which is the elementary schools. And the whole idea of this master plan was to get the middle school kids out of the elementary schools, consolidate the elementary schools. Remember, we're going to save $4 million a year, and to make it work so that the schools work better themselves. It's not the new school. It's not one middle school or 2 middle schools. The original middle school was bigger than any of the 2 middle schools that were proposed that the city council allowed to go forward to design, or at least to conceptually design. But let's find a committee that's going to bring new ideas and go forward, not backwards and not rehashing the past.
I just want to say, I think that the membership is key, and I would like to have the language before me to look at and amend and talk about the membership and really formalize all that. So I'm in favor of tabling, so I'll second Councilor Anderson Burgos's.
Before we vote on tabling, which is not debatable, I'm open to suggestions from the committee for other members. I'm not hearing any suggestions.
Yeah, I want to see the whole language of the ordinance in a draft form.
Well,
And-
it's going to say what you have before you. It's not going to say anything different. So what I'd like to understand from the committee that wishes to table it, you have concerns about membership. So what do you think is missing in the order relative to membership?
I'm not sure, because without the ordinance in front of me and understanding the way that I want to structure this committee, I wouldn't be able to say who's missing. I think, the categories here seem somewhat arbitrary, and so I want to be able to make things more concrete if we're going to move forward on some sort of study committee. The motion to table has been made and seconded. It's not debatable. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
1 no.
No.
2 noes, so the motion to table has failed. Is there?
Motion to send to legal for legal form with the current language as written.
And then to return to the
To return
ordinance
to committee and review, that's fine, but we don't need an order for that. I mean, I just need to work with Crystal on getting that language
I
before
want
us.
an official vote, please.
Sure, so on the motion to send to legal for a draft language of the ordinance of the membership of the study committee, all in favor?
Aye.
4-0. And then continuing out of order, Council Bartley, did you want to take up item number 15 for, I heard you were leaving early?
If any, thank you, wherever it is, let me find my agenda. I have it here on my computer. Anyhow, fire away, fire away.
So on
Grizzly.
the, item number 15, if there's a motion to take up item number 15 out of order, that is, that the city council amend city ordinances to require property owners to A, clear snow away from fire hydrants, and B, clear leaves from catch basins.
So moved.
Is that, Mr., yeah, I have 8 and 15, I think, those are the two that
Yeah.
I have.
I didn't see 8, I'm sorry.
Yeah, 8.
No, it's all good,
I do see it now.
it's all good. So, 15, yeah, I'll just, well, thank you to the two chairs for bringing this up. This is more of a Crystal question. So we're into suspension, true?
We haven't really voted on it yet, so on the motion to
Oh, I thought you said-
suspend
oh.
and proceed out of order to item
Okay.
number 15, all in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Okay,
Under suspension for Crystal.
Sorry for jumping the gun there. Madam Chair, may I address the?
yeah, sure.
Okay, all right. Crystal, just please correct, I might be wrong, but we know that landlords have a 24-hour turnaround to clear their sidewalks and that sort of thing. I'm almost sure that's a Supreme Court case that mandates they have to do it, clear their public ways 24 hours after a storm. Does that ring true to you?
I'm not positive on the 24 hours. I don't know what it currently is, but yes, there's legislation that states that landlords have to, or depending on what the lease says, sometimes the tenants are in control, but
Well, just in general.
snow removal has to be done, correct?
Yeah, I think landlords have an obligation to do it in 24 hours, and I don't think it's legislation. I think that was a Supreme Judicial Court case. I'm 95% sure that that's right, but I'll stand corrected. It's within that vein that I filed this order. So I'm not 1,000% sure we can mandate this, but I would just like the committee consider setting this to legal for legal form, and then bringing it back to committee for a discussion. And if Crystal comes back and says, you know, this is out of bounds for a city to mandate this, then so be it. It's to me it's in light of what happened with the fire hydrants not working out in Fairfield Avenue, and then after the storm we had, the first one we had, which I saw just a pretty fair number of hydrants that were not cleared away from. I thought that was an ordinance. And if it is, if this is duplicative, then you can tell us that, or point out where it is an ordinance. I mean, it's to me, it's no rush on doing this. And then also with the one of the big problems I see, certainly in the main thoroughfares, is just the catch basins just getting filled with debris, particularly leaves and that sort of thing. And it's, I mean, I know we do our best to clean it up, but it's kind of similar to how we don't have the city clear public sidewalks. We have landlords do it. So I'd like to see if we can sort of amend that and expand it, if the committee feels that makes sense, to include, you know, so just like we have landlords and others, you know, even not landlords, if you're a city, if you're a property owner, you have to clear your sidewalk. That's my understanding, although I haven't seen the ordinance, but I'm virtually certain that's an ordinance. It's within that same vein, Attorney Barnes, that I'd like to have the city mandate, you have to, if you're proximate to a fire hydrant, that the homeowner proximate to the fire hydrant has to clear out the fire hydrant free it from snow. And then furthermore, if whatever the home, and by the way, they get insurance benefit for doing that. So that can be noted to the insurance agent. If you're close to either a firehouse or a fire hydrant, you can have it's not a big premium break, but you can have a break on your premium because of your proximity. So they already have vested in it, and they already get a benefit. But in addition to that, I wanted to add the part about catch basins too, because I mean, I think of the one over here, Crystal, oh God, I used to walk there all the time from my office when I was walking to the Y, at the corner of, doesn't matter. It would just get clogged, I mean, just clogged with debris, and it would become this huge puddle, I mean, at least 30 feet in width. And I would call up Sue, and so that's no way to run a railroad. So if the city can't handle it, which clearly we can't do all of them, we've got to put the onus somewhere. And to me, we are asking property owners to clear out their sidewalks. I think we can reasonably expect that they clear out the fire hydrants after a storm, and we can reasonably expect that they clear out the catch basins proximate to their home. So it would be my hope that you could just verify that this is doable, and we could just get back to a legal form and proceed accordingly. Thank you.
So I'm going to recognize Councilor Vega in a minute, but I think all we want to do here is get a recommendation from legal providing guidance on whether ordinance language is created, or if there's suggestions for ordinance language that would address these two items. Councilor Vega?
Thank you. I just want to say that I'm warm to the concept in the order, but if we do end up crafting something, I would just like there to be a backup department within the city for people who are physically unable to accomplish this, should we be able to stipulate it. For example, on my street, there was a woman who has a fire hydrant, and she was not able to clear it because the plows hard pack the snow so hard against it. Unless you're very physically able, it's almost impossible to clear it. And she did get assistance, I believe it was from the water department. So whatever we would craft, I would like there to be a way for somebody who physically could not do it to achieve it as we consider this. Thank you.
So on the motion that we receive a guidance from legal on ordinance language.
So moved.
All in favor?
Just,
Under discussion?
yeah,
Councilor
and again, it would be nice if we were able to do these things. My concern is that it just happened you live in the wrong part. You've got that much more to do. And I'm not saying that people don't do it, because I do know some people that try to do it. But I do have concerns that we would, by where you live, you now have an additional obligation than someone else. And I'm not saying I don't know a way around it. I'd rather do it by incentive rather than by punishment. But I'm not sure that can work. So, but I appreciate the thought behind it, but that is my reservation, that I don't want, you've got to do this because you're here and 5 feet away, you're all set.
Well, Councilor Chair?
Councilor Bartley?
Yeah, just to Chair to Councilor Murphy. If you live on a house with a sidewalk, you're mandated to clear off. So what's your position there? I mean, you have to shovel your sidewalk, Councilor Murphy.
That's true.
So it's already an ordinance. So
but it's not my fire hydrant, and it's not my catch basin. That's my point. It is my sidewalk.
But your sidewalk. What's the difference? It's public safety. I'm missing how you're slicing that.
I mean, we don't have legal form in front of us, and so I think really relying on Crystal to provide some guidance about like what can be done, and what the current ordinance says is a good starting point, because right now we're speculating a little bit and having a discussion about just, you know, what do I say? Just potential scenarios as opposed to really looking at concrete language and how that would play out.
I think Counselor McGivern was in the queue.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Councilor McGivern?
at any rate.
Thank you. I agree with Councilor Murphy. Just two thoughts. The fire hydrant, I think, is a necessary public safety issue. It's a neighborhood issue. And I don't think it's so much the snowbank, but it's keeping the fire hydrant cleared so it doesn't freeze up, and when the fire truck, if they have to show up, can get the hoses into the fire hydrant itself. It's not walking to it, it's more clearing around it. But I think most neighborhoods, you know, if they know there's a fire hydrant somewhere away from, especially away from the road itself, you know, will help out neighbors and work with neighbors to make sure. And there's been a lot of more public education on that recently, including myself. I, you know, started recognizing one fire hydrant across the street from me, and someone clears it, and I know my neighbor, I think it's either her son or someone comes by and does it, and I've always kept an eye on it now to see if it isn't done someday, to get the shovel out and hopefully make it through without damaging anything inside. The catch basin, I have a thought, and I just want to think this out. I know we're not voting on it next week, but catch basin is in the road. And mandating by ordinance that someone has to go out in the road to clear a catch basin, I think there's a safety issue, a created safety issue there. I'd be interested in hearing from the engineer, because I grew up watching the DPW, and I know we transfer some of this to the sewer plant itself, coming around regular and clearing not just what was on top of the surface in the road, but clearing with the scoop going into these basins and pulling out the debris that tends to clog up right there, which is an added problem to not just what we see, but what's happening underneath. And I think mandating someone to go out in the road to clear something, you know, even though I know people who do it, you know, may be a safety issue in itself.
I think we wanted to hear from Bob. Do you want to speak on that?
Well, I just wanted to, through the chair, let Counselor McGivern know that this year for catch basins on Southampton Road, are they United Water now? Suez. Suez did come out and deal with those. So just as an FYI.
I think it is their responsibility, but we'll hear from the expert.
Sure. So in terms of cleaning catch basins, cleaning the sumps in the catch basins, Suez is on a plan where they're typically out to every basin in the city every 2 to 3 years. But we have thousands of catch basins across the city. They will respond if somebody calls the plant because there's a plugged inlet to a catch basin. They'll go out there and clean. They don't have a regular program to go out to the surface of every single catch basin in the city and clean them. It's more in response than so. And it's, you know, some of it, it's where does the problem come from? Does it come from residents that let their leaves blow into the street, so then the leaves wash down the street, and, you know, it's a lot of different things.
Or residents that blow their leaves into the street.
Yeah, that too.
Or blow the snow into the street and other things that happen as well. So they do, you know, I would encourage people that if they have an issue with catch basins being plugged at the surface, absolutely call Suez. If they believe that their catch basin the sump needs to be cleaned out, because sometimes some basins will fill up faster than other basins, certainly call Suez and they'll get the truck out there to clean it up.
Just call them directly?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So again, on the motion that we send to legal, receive some guidance and potential ordinance language, all in favor?
Aye.
4-0.
If I can ask the indulgence of the chair just one more time, because my arm is telling me I need to go home. On item 16 that was filed by Counselor Anderson Burgos, which I put on the agenda, I just want the committee to be aware that I have had communication with the resident of 8 Ivy Ave. She states the handicap space was in front of her house in the distant past. Her car had been hit 3 times when the handicap space was there. Therefore, that is why the current handicap space on that side of the road exists where it does. It's the only one on that side of the road, which I believe is the east side of the road. So that person was the applicant for the space. That person has used it for 20 years. And I would suggest that we will be creating a liability for the city if we do anything with that space. Because it's approved, it's in ordinance, there's no discontinuation request from the person who sought the handicap space approval, and I really think we have to respect it or we're creating liability for ourselves.
Thanks for that point of information. We'll proceed in regular order unless, Councilor Bartley, are you trying to get out of here? Okay, number 8.
Oh, sorry, I forgot you didn't
Last
do it.
item up out of order is item number 8. So, motion to suspend the necessary rules and proceed out of order to item number 8, which is filed by Councilor Bartley, that the city engineer provide a recommendation for temporary parking in front of United Bank, 1830 Northampton Street. There's a memo from the engineer under discussion. Mr. Parent.
Certainly. I did reach out to Councilor Bartley because I wasn't certain what the concerns were at this location, and certainly correct me if I misstate, but my understanding is there's really 2 concerns. There's one, the ability for cars to see pulling out of the exit from the drive-through. If you have vehicles that are parked very tight to the exit driveway, even if they maintain the 5-foot setback that's required by ordinance, it can still be difficult either for oncoming vehicles to see them or for them to see oncoming vehicles. That's issue number 1, as I understand it. Issue number 2, as I understand it, is the concern about long-term parkers on Northampton Street in that area, potentially conflicting with people that want to use the on-street parking to go into the bank for a short period of time.
You got it.
So, taking those 2 separate issues separately, certainly if there's a concern or if there's a desire to improve the line of sight, the easiest way to do that would be to expand the no parking restrictions that are currently by ordinance for 5 feet away from the driveway and push them back probably no more than, say, 15 feet away from the driveway on both sides. And I did double check. I looked up and down Northampton Street. The city has done that in a number of high volume driveways at Dunkin' Donuts, at Friendly's, et cetera, where the space that you're prohibited from parking next to the driveway is expanded beyond the typical 5 feet. So it wouldn't be doing anything unique from what has been done elsewhere. Again, given the volume of traffic, it improves safety. So that would seem like a reasonable solution to me to address that part of the problem. The other question gets into the whole issue of allocating parking availability. If there was a desire to keep those parking spaces available so that they turn over relatively quickly, they could be posted with a time limit. Taking a look at the adjoining property at the dental office next to the bank, the duration that the dentist office might want a limitation to be probably would be greater than the bank might. You know, the bank, a patron might be perfectly fine with 15 minutes or 30 minutes, whereas the dentist office might want an hour to 2 hours. That would, if those spaces were posted at 1 to 2 hour maximum, that would solve the long-term well, it wouldn't say solve, at least it would outlaw the long-term parking issue. Whether it was able to be enforced or not would be a different story. It's a slippery slope, though, when you start restricting access to what is currently public parking on the street. For the record, I will note that the bank does have a on-site parking lot, and that on-site parking lot, in fact, does actually exceed what the zoning ordinance would require for spaces based on the square footage. But I will say it's awfully convenient to pull up to the front of the bank and pull right by the front door.
Councilor Bartley.
Yeah, I think the recommendations are terrific. I think both the 15-foot buffer or whatever, what you said, Bob, I think that makes a lot of sense. So that motorists exiting, looking south, because that's where they're likely, you know, so looking to their left, if you would, is they're going to have a better sight line. So I think that's a critical one. The time limit portion, I really don't care. I think 2 hours sounds great because Oakdale's been there forever. He's a wonderful dentist. I'm just blanking the dentist's name. He's a real gentleman, and he's been in business for a long time, and somebody we don't want to restrict access for his patients. I think he's limited. He has parking as well at the dentist's office. I think he lives there too. Pretty sure he does. And just a wonderful gentleman, and real credit to the community. And I certainly wouldn't want to have a surprise 15-minute parking for his patients. I'm not a patient there either, so there's no vested interest for me. But he's just somebody I've known for. I'm sorry, I'm blanking his name, but so you don't want to do that. I think if you recall, Bob, we had a bit of a parking crisis with all the spillover from Holyoke Medical. I still think that's the case. I think if you look at Courser Street, you'll see that is just jam-packed from top to bottom with employee parking either at Holyoke Medical or 10 Hospital or 2 Hospital. So that's just where they park, and it's while we respect that, and I don't want to make any amendments there. Although I would suggest that you look at how close they park at the top of Courser, where it comes into merges with Northampton Street. But that ought to be looked at with that little buffer zone too. So motors pulling out of Courser have a little better sight line. So all that being said, I think the recommendations are really super. And whether you want, 2 hours sounds good to me, because dental appointments can go on. And bank customers, as speaking to the branch managers there, most of their customers park in the parking lot. I think very few park on the street. I just think it's the long-term parkers there that really cram up the spaces. And I wouldn't want you to have to stripe particular spaces there but I think at least putting that buffer, no parking beyond this point, and then a little sign that might say, again, as I told you, I can't stand signs, but in this case they're relevant. No parking, parking up to 2 hours, I don't think that's off the wall.
I'm in favor of the 2-hour limit, but Council Bartley, I have a question for you. So is there a need for overnight parking in this area?
Negative.
Okay. So then we could post the 2-hour for the full duration of the day. We don't have to put like a time limit like
Sure, but you could say 2 hours, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Why not? You could just say 2. Dr. Debian, is that what it is, Joe? I can't. He's a gentleman. I just can't blank on his name.
No, he's not Oakdale. He's Holyoke.
He's Holyoke. All right, that's wrong. Or whatever it is. Okay, so, boy, I'm blanking. It's right there at Oakdale. I just can't think of his name. Isn't that awful?
8 a.m.
So I don't believe that there's any need for overnight parking there, but I wouldn't want to. I rarely see it, but 2-hour parking max from 8 a.m. when the dental, I think they open at 8 p.m. I'm sure they're open late some nights, so 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. I don't think that's off the wall.
Sounds good.
And leave it at that, and the little buffer is good.
All right, so I'll make a motion that we adopt the engineer's recommendation to extend the buffer at the driveway from 5 feet to 15 feet, and accept the recommendation to limit parking to 2 hours between the hours of 8 a.m. and 8 p.m.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. 4-0. Thank you. Okay, so I would like to entertain a motion to suspend the necessary rules and take up items number 4, 5, 6, 7. Is there 7? Yeah, 7, 9 has already been taken up, 10, and 16 as a package.
So moved.
All in favor?
I just want to note that resident also said at least one of those handicapped spaces across the street is often used.
I've been.
So I'm just sharing information from the neighborhood and.
Yeah, months of observation myself.
You need help?
Yeah,
I'm just getting organized.
So, motion has been made and seconded to take up the remaining items as a package. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so moved.
Take care, Linda.
Item number 4 is filed by Councilor Murphy, that the no parking except to load and unload restriction on the northerly side of Sargeant Street between Main Street and the alley be eliminated. Under discussion, Mr. Parent.
If I could make one request through the chair, could we discuss item number 4 and item 7 together?
Sure.
Is there-
Everything
there-
is under suspension, so we could also just read into the record item number 7 for discussion, which is that the city council asked the city engineer to review parking on Sargeant Street between Main and Race Streets and recommend the best locations to have 4 parking spaces designated as 30-minute parking. The request should be from 11 to 7, I'm assuming that means AM and PM, Tuesday through Sunday, and again, under discussion.
Sure. And the reason I suggested we talk about both of them together is my understanding is that Councilor Murphy's desire is to really address the needs of a new business that's going to be opening at 73 Sargeant Street.
Correct.
So when he came to me with how do we deal with the parking issues, I, as I'm doing lately, go to the ordinance table to see what's there. And I found a couple of things. I found that item number 4, which is the removal of the loading zone prohibitions, those exist within the ordinance table today. There does not appear to be any need for those restrictions. They are still currently posted on the street, though. So what I would recommend is that if the council agrees there's no longer any need for those restrictions, is to vote to remove that item from the ordinance table, and we'll take the signs down.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that was originally there, I'm sure, for Weinstein Furniture, and then for the Grace and Demos, which took over, but they've been nothing there for 8 or 9 years. That would provide some additional parking, both for the church, for the La Copa Club, and also for this business.
Great.
So moving on to item 7. Item 7 is just up the street, the other half of the block, basically from the alleyway up to Race Street, along Sargeant Street. The intent, as I understand it here, would be to create effectively some short duration spaces directly in front of the new business to open. Again, the interesting thing is I went to the ordinance table to see what was already there. And you can see there's actually a fairly complicated ordinance, which I don't know how they could ever fit all those words on one
That's what I was
sign.
thinking when I read it.
But a fairly complicated ordinance that had been passed at some point in the past. Those locations are not currently posted in the field. So even though there's an entry in the ordinance table, there's nothing there on the street right now. So on the street, it's completely unrestricted parking from the alley up to Race Street. What I've suggested to Councilor Murphy is that we could tomorrow more or less comply with the order that's already in the table and put up 30-minute parking signs with the time limit restrictions that are more or less what the ordinance currently says. Try it out, see how it works with the new business, and if it works, then update the ordinance. I'll be honest, I generally don't like to take this approach. I would prefer to see a new business open because, again, we're dealing with conflicts and competing demands for parking all the time. And to presume that there's a conflict and restrict access before the business is even opened may be a tricky path to go down. The reason I'm more inclined to support it in this case is the restriction is already there, so that the council wouldn't be taking action on something that previous councils haven't already acted upon. But if this is a brand new location, I would recommend the business open. We determine whether or not there's a conflict. If there's no conflict, ideally the best thing you do is you have public spaces that tenants can use, that businesses can use, the business across the street can use, and keep it unrestricted whenever possible.
Under discussion, Councilor Murphy.
Yeah, and I always appreciate the work that Bob does, so my only concern, and originally when I filed this, the business thought they were going to have a chance to be opening sooner, and now it's later. But they've given me pretty strong indication that the 11 to 7 Tuesday through Sunday would be their needs. And I do know, there are some concerns in terms of, there's a church there that has a lot of parking issues. Actually, there's two churches there that have a lot of parking issues, and so there's some concern there. So, with the current one at 8 to 6, I think that, and doing Monday through Friday and then Thursday till 9:30, if we had kept with that one, I think that would create more problems. So I would like us to, if possible, to create the ordinance which would meet their anticipated needs. And, my gut is I've heard now March or April. Is that what you're hearing?
I heard it no sooner than February, so who knows?
Okay.
It's hard to say. Yeah.
So I think we got time to do basically what they're asking and make the change in the ordinance, and then get signs up as they are opening. So that would be my hope that we can do.
I would prefer more simple and straightforward signage, so something that has the designated times and designated days in a more concise manner would be my preference. The orders before us, I think it's totally fine to amend the language in the ordinance on the floor here to reflect what was written in the order itself. So 30-minute parking in the space that's designated in the ordinance currently, but instead of the 30-minute parking and all these different hours, simply say 11 a.m. to 7 p.m., Tuesday through Sunday. Do you feel that that's amenable, or?
It's certainly doable. Sort of my position is that we're trying to fix a problem that we don't even know exists yet. It certainly will be of benefit to the business, and if the council decides that that's a priority, let's do it.
I keep going by there to see if there's there seems to be nobody parking there, so I'm assuming this really will try to take care of their customers. And again, as you've noticed, I've had concerns about parking with a lot of businesses that are opening, and I do have concerns, and I've tried to work with this gentleman to try to figure out a better parking scenario as well. And I know you've gone down there with me and looked at things to try to find better parking options. But right now, this looks like the best option that we have available. So if we can make the 11 to 7, I think that for right now, that makes the most sense.
Yeah, I think we should, I understand that there's no conflict now, but I think what I hear Councilor Murphy saying is that there is a conflict anticipated based on the current traffic and parking patterns, that there seems likely to be a conflict even though they're not yet open. So I think it makes sense. I'd support amending the ordinance.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we amend the ordinance so that it does reflect a 30-minute parking from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Tuesday through Sunday from the alleyway of on Sargeant Street up to Ray Street, which would be westerly to Ray Street, but in this case, it's the east. The language he's got there, but
just amending the timing.
Yep.
So the motion has been made and seconded then, all in favor?
Aye.
To amend, and then, so we took up 4 and 7 under discussion as a package, and I think we can now motion to approve the recommendations of the engineer and the amendments that we made in committee. All in favor?
Item 4,
Yes, 4 and 7.
which we're repealing, right?
Yeah, so we're just adopting the recommendations.
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so proceeding on to item number 5, that in support of a $6.566 million MassWorks grant for infrastructure improvements that will serve an affordable homeownership project in the vicinity of Carlos Vega Park in South Holyoke, ordered that a number of street changes be changed to increase pedestrian and bicycle access. Under discussion, Mr. Parent.
I'll introduce this and then ask that the committee defer further discussion on this until the next meeting, and I'll explain why. As the council's probably aware, the city has received a grant from MassWorks to make some significant infrastructure improvements, really from Carlos Vega Park on one block all the way down to Valley Arena Park, going from Adams Street to Hamilton Street. Really, that whole quadrant of the city. Some pretty, from my standpoint, some pretty interesting, some pretty exciting things that could be happening there. To support the concept of creating more of a neighborhood feel there, there's a number of recommendations that we'll be coming to the council with relative to how those streets are laid out, how the traffic patterns are laid out. We've been working with the engineers. We have a pretty tight time frame for MassWorks to spend the money. We knew we had to get in front of the council fairly quickly. We're not quite at the point that the concepts are advanced far enough that I'd like to share them with the committee and then the full council. So I'd like to hold off until the next meeting, but I'm confident that we'll be ready by that time.
Okay. Any other comments, Councilor Murphy?
No, I appreciate, we've met with the Housing Authority, we've met with Bob, and, we're trying to make the neighborhood revitalized in many ways, and this is part of that, and I just appreciate the efforts that they've been making, so I make a motion we table this and expect to take it up on the 28th if possible.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Item number 6 is that the DPW install truck exclusion signs at both ends of Bemis Road. Mr. Parent.
So I have a pretty long response to this. Part of this response the committee's seen a year plus ago at this point. And really to recap, truck restrictions do need to be approved by Mass DOT. And not having been through the process fully myself, I've learned a few more things this time around. The recommendation is made by the District 2 in Northampton, but the actual decision gets made by the Traffic Division in Boston. So it goes up a couple of levels at Mass DOT. The city cannot just put up truck restrictions if the city decides to, or at least it's not honoring its agreement with Mass DOT that in exchange for getting Mass DOT Chapter 90 money, we will live by the rules and regulations for doing things like this. Truck restrictions, Bemis Road looks as though a street that might qualify for truck restrictions because it starts and it stops fully within the city of Holyoke. When you have streets that might divert traffic into adjoining communities, it becomes much more problematic. Without going through the process fully, I can't say, for instance, that Mass DOT might still not have a concern that if a truck is trying to go up Bemis Road, going up the hill, can't go up the hill, it's going to have to go northbound on Route 5 and end up going up to East Hampton or Northampton instead. They may or may not determine that means you're shifting traffic into an adjoining community. If that's the case, then the approval of the adjoining community is also required, just as a matter of, and again, you'll get tired of me saying these things over and over again when these types of orders come up. To qualify for a truck restriction, you need to meet a couple of different warrants. One is you essentially have to have enough truck traffic so that it's an issue. If you have one truck go down the street once every week, there's no reason to prohibit that from happening. So the first thing you need to do is you need to go out there and you need to do a traffic count. We've done traffic counts already on Bemis Road. The problem is the equipment that we have isn't sophisticated enough to differentiate between vehicle types and vehicle weights, and the requirements are relative to the number of vehicles that are over 2.5 gross tons is what's considered to be a heavy commercial vehicle. As these things go, relatively small cost to outsource that. It would cost about $500 to bring in an outside firm to install the more sophisticated traffic counting equipment, determine what types of vehicles, how many vehicles that exceed that 2.5 ton threshold, and to see whether or not we fall into that minimum volume requirement. You then need to take a look at, is there something unique? Another option is there's something unique to this about the street, the width of the street, the cross section of the street, the fact that the pavement is a different type of construction that might warrant treating that street differently than any other street. That's not really the case. Bemis Road is built the same way as most of the city streets. And then I will note that it's typically much easier to do nighttime restrictions for truck restrictions. I don't know if that is the concern here or not. It probably doesn't satisfy everything that the residents might like to, to restrict on Bemis Road. So there's a process first. Do we trigger that vehicle threshold? We might not. Offhand, I can't say whether or not we do or don't. If we do, then there's a fairly detailed report that needs to be submitted. It is within the resources of the city, myself, to do that report. It will be time consuming. It will require the capabilities of an outside traffic counting firm, again, to do that $500 count. And then we can go through and submit it to the state. The state really does not like truck restrictions because, particularly as it bounces up to the trucking community and it bounces up to the federal officials, their philosophy generally is that roads are built to accommodate vehicles. And when you start restricting that, you potentially start restricting things like interstate transportation and things like that the trucking lobby is very much against. Doesn't mean that the state wouldn't approve it. We have truck restrictions right now. For instance, on Westfield Road, we have truck restrictions on the lower section of Homestead Ave, but it is a process that needs to be followed. So that's sort of the education, which is we can start the process. We can see what the counts look like. I can come back to the council to see if it looks like we trigger that warrant. If we do, then we can take it the next step, but I can't guarantee any sort of an outcome with Mass DOT at this point.
And just to be clear, the nighttime restrictions do not require the previous two warrants being met.
They don't. Basically, if you have a neighborhood that's primarily a residential neighborhood that has truck issues, and that's Bemis Road, it's a residential neighborhood, potentially with trucks driving right through the middle of it, DOT is much more willing to grant nighttime restrictions than whole-scale restrictions, partly because there aren't as many trucks going at night as well, so I don't think the restriction would be as onerous.
And do both A and B need to be met to satisfy or to, I guess, warrant the
No, at least one of
One
those,
of
so
them,
we
one of
don't,
the two.
yeah. And if you can put them both together, it makes even a stronger case, but
And just one more question. Have you talked to Councilor Tallman about this directly, about this process and the requirements, or is this the first time that anyone on the council is hearing the process formally?
relative to Bemis, this is the first time. I know there was a truck restriction order that came up about a year or so ago, of which much of this language I copied and pasted back into this memo, but too unique to Bemis Road, no, I've not talked to Councilor Tallman.
Under discussion, anyone in the committee? My preference would be to get these comments over to Councilor Tallman to see where the community, where the neighborhood wants to go. So I think we have copies here. And in the meantime, I think a motion to table is in order, so we could get some more guidance from the maker of the order.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to table item number 6. All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. 7 we took up just a moment ago. 8 we took up. 9 we took up. We're up to 10. Filed by Councilor LeBron Martinez that Heritage Street between Dwight and Appleton Streets be changed to only one way. Mr. Parent.
Okay. The first thing I want to say is that unlike the order that I asked to be tabled for tonight, this order, we're coming to the council very late in the process. I have to acknowledge that. This project, as you probably know, has been under development for many years. I pretty much picked it up once the project was already designed and going out to bid at that point. So I'm trying to catch up on a couple of things, and this is one item that I'm trying to catch up on. Heritage Street, if you've driven down it recently, the nice thing about Heritage Street is it's smooth. It only has the binder course of pavement down. The final pavement isn't down yet, but it's much better than it has been in a long time. What you may have noticed is that it feels narrower than it used to be, because it is narrower than it used to be. In order to improve the safety of bicycles and pedestrians, we brought the curb lines in. You might recall that the sidewalk on the park side of Heritage Street used to drop down to a very narrow sidewalk, about a foot and a half wide in front of the retaining wall there. So you could get all the way to Appleton Street, but you couldn't do it on an ADA compliant sidewalk. You couldn't do it very safely. So that curb line got brought in order to accommodate bicycles on Heritage Street, which it is, one, a condition of Mass DOT funding. It's also part of the city's ordinances when the city adopted the Complete Streets Ordinance with the goal of making the streets as pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicle friendly as possible. This is a case where to do all of that on one street, we can't do it within the right-of-way. Heritage Street is narrower than many of the city right-of-ways, so it has less space available. When I asked Councilor Martinez to file this order, I originally asked her to file it with the goal of one-way traffic from Dwight Street towards Appleton Street. That's what was depicted on the design plans. At the moment, it's a matter of just putting the paint on the street. The paint, it can be painted any different direction. The design didn't change, the curb lines don't change. After watching the street over the past month or two and seeing how people are using the street, particularly on weekends when people are coming in to use the park and go to the carousel, everybody is much more comfortable parking on the right-hand side of the street. It's legal to park on either side, but that's sort of common nature. And what I see on weekends is that the entire length of Heritage Street gets lined up on a busy weekend with cars parked on the right-hand side. To facilitate that, I'd actually recommend that we don't make it one way from Dwight to Appleton, we make it one way from Appleton to Dwight. When I say that, two things: one, that doesn't follow the alternating one-way direction as we look at the city's downtown grid, that we're kind of right on the edges of the grid. As you go between High and Maple Street, for instance, you have one way, one direction, then one way the other. And that, I believe, was the original design thought, is then would alternate again as we go down to Heritage. Again, I don't think that functions as well based on the way that people are using the roadway today. And then lastly, I will note that it does become, it will require some people to change their travel routine. People are used to being able to go down Heritage Street from both sides, and if now they're only able to go there one direction, it will impact some people. The good news, I guess, is that until the street was repaved, not many people drove down Heritage Street. The traffic counts that were done when this project was designed had about 300 cars per day going down Heritage Street. It had 3 to 4 times that volume going down Front Street on the other side, and it had 10 to 15 times that going down Dwight Street. So it was a very lightly traveled street. I expect it's going to be more heavily traveled now that it's much easier to travel.
I have a really quick question, then I'll recognize Councilor McGivern. So if we're going to create parking along the entire right side of the road for this one-way street, is it possible to create the bike lane going in the opposite direction or on the other side of the street? Or is that not safe at all? Because it just seems like, where would the bike lane go? Or there just seems like a risk of, doors opening up on cyclists, or that you're really starting to overlap a bit too much on that right side if the street is one way and the bicyclists have to be on the right side where all the parking is going to be.
It's an interesting thought. I don't know if I've seen that sort of counter direction before. Your point relative to doors opening is absolutely an issue. There will be a separation between, well, no, there won't be a separation. There'll be a separation between the travel lane and the bike lane, but there won't be a separation between the parking and the bike lane. What some communities are starting to do, and it's really hasn't gotten out to Western Mass very much yet, you see it in Cambridge and Somerville and a few places, is some communities will actually put the parking lane in the street and the bike lane right up to the curb. And that way, given that most of the time it's the driver's vehicle that opens, you don't have a driver's door that's going to open into the bike lane. And so the bike lane gets protected by putting the bike lane on the inside of the parking. It would be a change in behavior that would take a little bit of people adapting to, and some communities, it might be an interesting thing to try. I'm not certain how well it would go over, though, with the public.
And actually, now that you're saying that, I think I've seen small raised structures that help people to recognize that there's a bike lane next to the curb, and yet parking is on the other side of the curb. like something small, like,
I know going into Kendall Square in Cambridge, there's a couple of blocks I've driven down, where, yeah, you see there's, some of the
folding.
the folding posts there that will help to demarcate where the parking stops and where the bike lane starts. Some interesting ideas, and it's certainly where you have very heavy bicycle usage, you spend more and more time and resources on making that bike lane safe. We're not there yet in Holyoke. We may not be there for a while, so, do we go that far? Because like everything, there's always trade-offs. There's always, you give something up in order to get something else.
Thank you. Councilor McGivern.
Thank you. With all due respect, Bob, and I do have a lot of respect, and even with your arguments here this evening, I will not vote for this. And I only noticed the last 2 weeks that the project narrowed Heritage Street. I think it's something that should have been brought to our attention before the project took place, but that's over the dam, I guess. Just a couple of thoughts. It's not just a convenience. There's a lot of issues here, and I'll try and do this as quickly as possible, because I work in this building. I work sometimes in the annex building. I work 6 days a week in the courthouse. I'm very familiar with Heritage Street. I'm on the weekends. I'm down in the merry-go-round doing volunteer work. I've, like many Hoyokers, used Heritage Park throughout the course, especially this summer when there are concerts and events that are going on. There are 2 parking decks. There's a police department that feeds the courthouse using Heritage Street. There are safety issues. There are more than just convenience issues, and I want to really get into this part of it because my major concern is the flow of traffic, and I'm not talking about Heritage Street, and I'll try and explain that quickly. But there are no bicycle lanes on High Street. There are no bicycle lanes on Maple Street. Am I correct?
There are not currently. It's part of the planning process for a project that might be out 2 or 3 years that's in the early phases of design, which again will have to come to the council as we are on the South Holyoke project before we move ahead to construction to seek approval. But
Okay.
that is the plan.
But without a bicycle lane, we could keep a 2-way flow of traffic on Heritage.
I'm not certain we can do 2-way and the parking. I can look at that. I won't commit with certainty that we can.
Well,
As
maybe
currently laid out with the curb
we
line.
can do away with parking, because here's my real concern. The one-way streets you just talked about, one way, the other way, that wasn't the original design of this city. Obviously, there weren't a lot of cars when those streets were designed. That is a mandate, or probably no longer, a mandate of the federal government when Interstate 91 came into the city. And the Interstate 91 was supposed to come down Beach Street and come down and connect and actually cut off the downtown area. And in some respects, that would have made a lot of sense. But at the time, it was well before my time, and I think even before Councilor Murphy's time, the city argued against that for some good reasons. And if you understand the history of 91, when 91 leaves Springfield and goes across the river, it's going 20 miles west and doesn't start to come back into a true northern route until the end of Holyoke. It's closer to Smith's Ferry where it becomes north again. The federal government mandated, and the one-way streets start up at Linden Street. And they mandated these streets, I don't know all the reasons, but that's when Holyoke went to one-way streets. That's when Beach Street became one-way, which was very controversial, and that's where I grew up. And as, trying not to get into too much of these details, the good and bad of these one-way streets is they create a flow of traffic of coming and going. The bad is, and this is why I think Heritage Park needs to be 2-way, is our intersections, especially on Maple and High Street, are very old and don't accommodate pedestrian cross traffic very well. I know there's a plan in the works. Our intersections of getting traffic through High Street, getting traffic back out through Maple Street works. Getting traffic around when you have to go from Maple Street to City Hall is a problem. When you have to leave City Hall to get to Maple Street is a problem. There is congestion of traffic at all the traffic lights during the course of the peak hours of the day. If you make either way, Heritage Street one way, you're gonna add to that problem up above, because people are gonna be forced to go around. They're not gonna be able to come from Main Street, come up and be able to go either way on Heritage Street, come up Appleton Street, go either way on Heritage Street. You're not gonna, it's gonna create problems, you know, that I think we're not ready to handle up above. When we redo the lights, when we redo Maple and High Street, then it's time, I think, to start about a one-way, talk about a one-way on Heritage Street. But right now, it's the cars that use Heritage Street use it more than once a day. I think the condition of Heritage Street limited the amount of use, and I agree with you. Once people realize Heritage Street is now repaved, the cobblestones are gone, you know, there's gonna be more use on it. But I really would like some more feedback as to that flow of traffic pattern throughout the entire downtown, not just one street. And just, I always like to tell a story here, you know, I know it's getting late, Councilor Lisi, but those cobblestones were not the original cobblestones. They were put in by a CETA project in 1979, I believe, to look like the original street. And they did for a while, until they started popping up and popping down and created a disaster. But it's, I get what you're saying, but I really think it's a bigger issue than just one street. I think the entire flow of traffic downtown is dependent upon whether we make this one way or not.
Mr. Parent, do you want to take some measurements and see if two-way is still possible with the bump outs to the curb that occurred, and then also do some research about the flow of traffic around that, and then come back to us next month with your findings?
I will definitely do that, yep.
Joe, you're amenable to that?
I'm fine.
Okay.
I'm always open-minded, especially Mr. Parent.
Okay, so then on item number 10, motion to table is in order.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. This is yours, sorry. And then I
Item
think
16.
it's only number 16 left.
Huh?
So item number 16 is ordered that a handicap space on Ivy be condensed to
13.
one space. 13. Yes, I'm sorry.
No, we're going 16 so
Oh, yeah,
Bob
yeah.
can get done. So.
Thanks. Sorry about that.
It's only 10 o'clock.
We are out of
Plenty of
order.
time.
We're under suspension of the rules. So handicap spaces on Ivy Street be condensed to one space in front of 8 Ivy, and it be located on the east side of the street, 90 feet north of Dwight Street. And the recommendations are below. Mr. Parent.
I think what's put forward here is really in response to the way the order was filed, and I know we've talked about this before, and I know with Councilor Vega here had expressed some concerns. It's a tricky issue, and it's really not a technical issue. You know, once
Well said.
Thank you.
once the need and desire issues are sorted out, I can tell you exactly where to place those spaces, and it's not something I can solve.
Right.
So, in response to the order, I did provide the language that if the upper 4 items were deleted from the ordinance table and the order was followed, that would need to be the new entry going into the ordinance table, which would be a single space 90 feet north of Dwight Street. From what we heard, I think, a little bit earlier tonight, it sounds like that may not be. It is still open to question.
So I've driven, it's been months and months, and I've been driving past Ivy Street, going down Dwight, and no one's ever parked. And with all the snow, when all that happened, someone called me, was saying, why is there handicap parking here? We have no place to put our cars. The kid that lived in the first floor no longer lives there, has moved since. So it's an issue. And then across the street, I believe it's 1421 Dwight Street, their driveways located on Ivy Street. So where the current, on the east side, where that currently is placed, the handicap, what they always fear is that they're gonna hit the car because it's so close to their driveway. And I've been there and I've looked on Google Maps and I can see what he's talking about, that it's so close that when he backs up, he can't back up this way because then he's backing up into Dwight. He has to back up this way. And because the handicap parking is right there so close to his driveway, he's always scared he's gonna hit that car. So if anything, the handicap where it's located now has more chances of getting hit than where it would be if it would have been in front of the house. Because I've looked at the angle, there's no other way. A car, you have to be drunk or just not, you shouldn't have a driver's license or the ability to drive if you can't maneuver in and out of that street, you know? But that's my opinion, and I've visited, I cannot even count on both hands how many times I've been there.
I would agree with what you're saying. I would agree. I believe there's more spaces in the table because there's also some inconsistency between the table and what's actually out there in the street.
Yeah.
Between both the table and in the street then is what is currently needed, but I can't be the arbiter of what is needed.
Yeah,
So, I'm just looking at the map here. So is this 8 Ivy Ave? And this is where the parking space is?
Yeah, if you.
And so when you are writing 90 feet north of Dwight Street, does that retain what's presently marked on the street, or does that move it up closer to 8 Ivy Ave?
I think it moves it a little bit further to the north. The current entry is 80 feet north. What Councilor Burgos had filed would be 90 feet north, and it sounds like that's in response to the driveway concern.
But it's on a different side of the street, though.
No, it's on the right
Same
side of the
side.
street.
Right-hand side or east side.
Right here.
The other one can be deleted because that individual is no longer using.
Here's where it is. This is the driveway. And this is where, see how it's so close?
Mm-hmm.
And there's all this space here where it could be located where it's safer and it won't get hit.
I think 10 feet would be sufficient for the car to clear easily.
Oh, certainly, yes.
There,
Yeah.
so that
That's
needed
fine with me.
more.
So all that would be effectively happening is moving the present space that is actually utilized away from Dwight Street 10 additional feet and closer to the applicant's their house. Which is what handicap.
I'm all for doing that, but I'm still confused because I'm reading Ivy Avenue East and everything up there says Ivy Avenue West.
Because there's two across the street. Through the chair, sorry.
So I think Mr. Parent prefaced
But are
that
those
everything
not
that's in the
gonna be
table
there,
is
or-
not actually in use.
So the four above are no longer valid.
Well, they're all, if I'm correct, all of these ordinances do not reflect the current paintings on the street.
You know, two obviously expired, but the other two are no longer valid either.
The two on the west side are.
There are, if I recall correctly, 3 signs on the street.
One
There's
on the east.
4 entries in the table.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
but-
there's at least a need for 1 space somewhere.
Two of the entries are expired. One of them on west.
Okay. One east and one west, and then the two middle west are still valid.
There are two there.
Okay, I'm within a.
But those don't reflect the present parking space that's painted.
I'm just looking up the email I'd sent out a long time ago with a figure.
West, east, no, it is east, it is east. Right, because Dwight goes east-west.
Yeah, the east side of the road is the right-hand side of the road as you're leaving Dwight to get onto Ivy.
Yep. So the only space that's painted with signage is, it would be 80 feet north of Dwight Street on the east side. That's what we see the markings are on the street. Do you want to see them? Did you have a chance to look at them?
Yeah, I showed them. Oh, yeah, I've been there for,
Yeah, yeah.
went on, so this is a house, this is okay, so this is 1421, I believe, 1421 Dwight Street, right? This is their driveway located on Ivy. This is that parking space. Every time this gentleman pulls out, he almost hits this vehicle. This parking space here basically doesn't belong, technically, legally, does not belong to this person, but it's for this person. They're the ones that applied for the handicap parking. So we're thinking that it would be better for it to be directly in front of the house, because now.
And that is their house?
This is their house.
And that's what we're
Well, it
doing?
wouldn't be directly in front, it would just be closer, because it would be
Closer.
moving just 10 feet away from the present driveway where there seems to be a conflict.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Councilor McGivern?
If you put,
This is like a puzzle, it's like.
if you put the space in front of 8 Ivy, aren't we gonna lose a space?
No.
Bob, if you got 10 feet from the driveway, there's enough place, right now, there's 2 driveways on 8 Ivy, or not 8 Ivy, but on each side of the house. In the parking, handicap parking is a larger space. In each of those spaces you have to be 10 feet away from the driveway. You're gonna lose a space, right? That's why the original handicap place was put where it is.
It doesn't look like there's enough space for 2 parking.
In the other one.
Yeah, I would have to measure it in the field to know is it exactly the 42 feet that we would need, plus the 5-foot setbacks to get.
That's the 5-foot setback that
Yeah.
the owner of 1421 Dwight Street was saying.
If I may,
Of course, yeah.
I wish I'd printed out a copy of this, but. This is the figure I marked up a year ago, last time we talked about. The red crosshatches.
Joe, do you
are
wanna
where
come look
there
at this?
are Currently. Handicap parking
Yep.
spots. At the time, I felt that it would be better to put that handicap parking space, but to Councilor McGivern's point, that might take what is currently 2 spaces and make it not quite big enough for 2 any longer, once the handicap
no.
space was placed there.
I thought
This
that,
space here is clearly only suitable for 1 space. It's never gonna be 2.
but I thought your recommendation was just to move this space 10 feet north.
I was mistaken. It was, when I saw the 80 feet call out, that was 80 feet west side, not on the SARS.
But it does look like, I mean, at least from what we have here, we could at least move it 5 feet further north.
It'll be, yeah, it'll
No,
get into
no,
their
no,
driveway.
no.
That existing space seems to work pretty, there's a piece of curbing that's too short for 2 spaces.
Mhm.
So if you're gonna allocate it for 1 space, allocate it for the 1 handicap space, which it currently is. My recollection was that
But this is shorter on this side than it is on this side, so
Yeah.
I feel like you could still move it
So that they don't.
2 or 3 feet forward and center it on that strip there.
jockey, certainly that could be shifted back and forth a little bit.
Mhm.
My recollection was that the resident was concerned about any changes last year, even giving up these spaces across the street, but I don't have any idea what the need for those spaces are.
So in this building,
But I
there
know they're
was.
there today.
Yeah, in this building, there was one kid who was handicapped, but has since been gone. So I got another call from a gentleman here, asking me to explain why are there 2 handicapped when all this snow came about. And so I was like, that's why I called Linda. I was like, Linda, we need to bring this back into committee, because this gentleman is concerned. There's like chaos happening right now. There's all this space here and no one utilizing it, and it could be used for, parking.
If the intent was to retain the space, but maybe make it, optimize it just a little bit, move it a few feet to get it dead centered so it was as far away from both driveways as possible.
What's the buffer, by the way, from this driveway to the edge of this? Like how far are
We
they?
don't have it.
City ordinance says 5 feet from
Why is that driveway got a curve to it?
no idea.
You know, that's, I've never seen that in a residential area.
A lot of things happened over the years.
There's a lot of give and take here, but I think for the good of the whole street, we have to maintain as many parking spaces as we can. And as long as that handicap space is being used, it's not taken away from the overall goal of keeping as many cars, you know, giving as many cars as possible to speak. Across the street's a whole different story. You know, if a person moves, we take down the handicap.
Yeah.
You know, but there are a lot of reasons that this space was created there, and I know it's been a problem with one household, and it's, you know, it's the person who's had it for 20 years. Has she been notified about this?
Yeah.
I think that's what Linda was just saying.
Yeah.
She said the reason why it's there, but I don't.
No, she know that we're talking about this evening.
Yeah. Yeah, because Linda mentioned.
They talked, because Juan asked Linda to talk to the resident that has the handicap spot. That's what I understand.
And her answer is?
That it needs to be there instead of in front of her house because of whatever accident. I mean, I didn't really understand exactly the full breadth of comments that were made, but I don't see how moving the space, you know, 2 to 5 feet forward, so north of the street, is going to alter any. I don't.
Well, I don't think I think the issue is moving it to 8 Ivy is a problem, not just for the individual, but you're going to lose a space.
Yeah, and I think that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is deleting all the spaces in the ordinance form because they're all incorrect, and then recreating an ordinance that reflects the current parking space, paintings, and signage, but optimizing, as Bob said, the placement of that space so that it's a little less closer to the driveway that's having the issues getting out. I mean, I think that's a reasonable response.
What I think it would look like, not exactly in the ordinance table, is that on my last page, 6 of 6, all 3 entries that say west would be deleted.
Yep.
Because those were for the opposite side of the street.
Yep.
And the first entry that currently says a 50 feet north of Dwight Street would be modified somewhat. I don't know, but not by 10 feet, but 2 feet or 5 feet or something like that, to keep it within that same section of the street, but perhaps locate it more centrally in that section.
Mm-hmm. I'm in favor of that.
Remember the last time we went through this?
What was that?
I'm confused.
It's still looking just at this single parking space
Yeah.
and
No,
and centering it.
There was another issue the last time we went through this, and we've gone through this multiple times. You know, I know
When I
it's
wasn't here, yeah.
I understand it's only your first or second time, Councilor Anderson Burgos, you know? There's, because of dumpsters, there are dumpster pickups across the street that have a very difficult turn for the truck to pick up the trash.
Mm-hmm.
And if I remember correctly, when the DPW designed this parking place, it was to accommodate that truck coming and going.
I think it would be further accommodated by moving it down the block 2 to 5 feet. I think what we should do is vote to approve the deletion of the west streets and approve the amendment of that east side parking space. And in the meantime, we can ensure that the person has an opportunity to come down to public comment next Tuesday if they want to speak in favor or against the changes that are being made.
Can I just ask one? So do we know that the 2 west side that are not plate generated that they're both no longer needed? I know we got one that we no longer need, but
I only know through what I've heard from council members.
I've been there 100 times. They're not even needed. The two on the west side are not needed.
Can I make a suggestion? Our handicap advisory committee, is that what we call it? Disability committee? That's, you know, their purview. They'll go do the whole thing for you. They'll talk to the people on that side of the street and see who needs it, who doesn't. You know, they research going up and they research going down.
There's a
Disability
Commission on
Commission.
Disabilities. We have a board that approves all the handicap placards or makes a recommendation on approval or denial.
Call them up.
Yeah, sure.
Easy.
Let's engage them. So then,
Because, yeah, I mean,
So-
I'm not trying to make it hard for anybody, but I'm trying to accommodate the current situation, which is those spaces are not being used.
well, and it really does seem like it accommodates everyone on the block to move that one space and slightly forward. Councilor Murphy, you wanted to speak.
I'm good.
So do we want to table and get a recommendation from the Commission on Disabilities?
Yeah, second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded to table and get a recommendation from the Commission on Disabilities. Bob, would you just amend that one entry for the eastward? Could you just get some better measurements so that the Commission on Disabilities can more exactly understand what your full recommendation would be to, again, optimize the placement of that one space? And do we need to file something to have you send along a communication to the Commission on Disabilities? You usually communicate?
Yeah, typically I haven't. I believe that Councilor Vacan had typically, I'm not quite certain, collaborated with the council, or the commission. I don't
Okay, so I'll reach out
actually
to,
know who the contact person is. Yeah.
I'll ask Ryan to get the full recommendation as amended this evening from you over to the Commission on Disabilities, and that we receive a recommendation from the Commission on Disabilities as to what they think of your recommendation.
Sure.
Okay. So
They'll check the trash truck out too. They'll do it all.
Who?
The commission. The issue of the trash truck, they'll check that out too.
Oh, okay, cool. Thank you.
And just one thought as I think about it, if we're talking about moving the sign 2 feet, 3 feet, 5 feet, the sign doesn't actually dictate exactly where the car parks. You
It's
know,
the
a
paintings,
vehicle
though,
may
no?
park a little bit in front of the sign, a little bit behind the sign, so jockeying a sign a couple of feet may not change behavior in any way, so it may
But
not have any
maybe it's just the
effect.
paintings then,
Sure.
the
yeah,
street paintings.
I'll look at it. Yeah, okay.
That might be easier.
That might circumvent everything that's troublesome
Right.
about this situation. I think that we've reached we have not reached the end of our agenda, but Councilor McGivern and Councilor Murphy, do you mind if we table these for another evening, or do you want to take them up?
Which?
Items number 12 and 13 and 14.
Well, 13 and 14 go together, and I filed 13 in February of 2019, and we are losing money on that, and I don't know why we can't get this out of committee.
Yeah.
And I'll do respect.
I would make a
You're right. I didn't notice.
I think we've got recommendations that are in the jacket, right? A chart or a fee schedule.
Right. That was from Mr. McManus. Thank you, Bob, for coming down.
Thanks, Bob. I mean, if we have it, I would be fine recommending that we move that
That fee schedule?
to become the official fee schedule. Oh, we have to have it in
It
front
would
of us.
be filed by Counselor Sullivan. You know, I never, even when I was chair previously, I never used the jacket.
Well, I think Councilor McGivern filed the first one, and then Councilor Sullivan filed the follow-up, if you will. But I think we've received a schedule, right, Joe?
We did. I don't know.
We had charts. I asked for research to be done. We had charts that showed other cities and communities.
Right.
We had both our administrative assistant did some research, and Mike McManus provided some research, you know, and
Here it is, I found it.
I'm sorry, Damien Cody provided some research also.
They're taken up together, they're in the jacket here together, and here's the table.
So I'll make a motion that we amend the fee schedule so that we adopt the recommendations of the various department heads involved in weights and measures.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adopt the fee schedule that was recommended by the various departments involved. All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. So that's 3 to
Thank you.
0.
And if we could, by item 12, I just want to, and I have no problem with you tabling it eventually, but I would like to make a couple of comments. Sorry to do this at this hour, but I'm a senior citizen.
That's fine. Please go ahead. I just want to, this is why. I just want to make sure that so item number 13 and 14 were taken up together, and they basically say the same thing. Okay, so then we've adopted both of them and the fee schedule that was attached. Okay, just want to make sure I have that for my notes. Go ahead, Counselor Murphy on item number 12. All in favor?
Aye.
So, again, I mean, this is, and the more research I do, the more frustrated I get regarding the zip car situation. But originally I was thinking, let's see, get a contract where we're going to make, but now I'm of the opinion that the contract that we have is really an invalid contract. And that the mayor really was not in a position, unless I am wrong, to create a contract for those spots, because those spots are still governed by Section 86-322
Oh, the ordinance.
on street parking meters. And it has not been repealed to my knowledge. I'm pretty certain I'm correct. So, and I think as we go along, I would like to, and I've asked, and I think my question now would be to the law department, how can we have a valid contract for zip cars on Maple Street when we have a city ordinance which has not been repealed and is still in effect for parking meters? And therefore, and what kind of actions can we take? Because I mean, this is, and I know people are going to tell me, well, this has been good for the city. Whether it's good for the city or not, ultimately the mayor has to live within the laws, just like we live within the laws. And you know, to me, if that's what we want to do, if that's what is, then the movement should have been to repeal the ordinance for those two spots, if in fact, and then come back and try to do a parking contract. I know Councilor McGivern has problems with that as well. But so that's where I'm at right now. I just think right now we have a contract that the mayor has negotiated that he had not the authority to negotiate for those spots. And I will.
And I would be interested in understanding whether or not we're receiving funds from Zipcar for those spots.
We are not.
So I'd be interested in asking the legal department to take whatever steps necessary to nullify and call Zipcar to the table again for the renewal of or the reissuance of a contract.
Well, I think first we cannot, again, I'm not a lawyer, but if there is an ordinance in effect that governs those spots, the mayor cannot unilaterally amend that ordinance and create a contract for any kind of services there that would be, in effect, repealing the ordinance without going through the proper channels. And, you know, I don't even know how to use zip cars, but if I did, I still would be, you know, the right way to do this is to repeal the ordinance, and then if that's the goal, then and the reason we're trying to repeal it is approved, then, and if it is legal to in fact have a contract with zip cars for those spots, then that's what we should have done. And right now, we're 4 years or 5 years behind we put a contract together that looks like it's illegal. And I would like the law department to give us a ruling how a mayor can contract out something that is governed by ordinance.
Well, I think it's clear that they can't. So I mean, we should just go ahead. Sure, we can do it that way. We can ask the legal department for an opinion on whether that's possible.
Mhm.
Because
if it's not, then, I mean, somewhere there's got to be a recourse. And what's the recourse? And I don't know, I mean,
Well,
do we?
I think we need to request the legal department. If that action was not legal, then the contract needs to be designated null and void in some way, shape, or form, and we could start over.
Yeah.
Happy to start over.
Yeah.
But I want to make sure that we're also getting some sort of compensation for the use of those spots.
Yeah, I would agree with that if in fact that's the case. But again, I don't think we can get, somewhere down the line, we've got to get a firm legal opinion that has validity so that we are in fact nullifying the current contract and going back to those being metered until otherwise noted.
Sure, so then on the motion to get an opinion from our legal department as to whether a contract can be written that supersedes our city ordinances.
Correct.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved, 3-0.
And make a motion, we table the rest of it for that opinion.
Yes, thank you. Waiting back for the opinion, so tabled otherwise.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Okay. Legal opinion, whether you should make a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Motion has been made and seconded to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so moved.